Thank you. Caitlin Stinger. All right, if Caitlin shows up, we will give her some time. All right, we're going to jump right in. Jackson, I think you are up.
Yep. You want me to just chat from here?
Yeah, why don't you come up here and sit at the front so everybody can see
It's
you.
good. Stellar. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Hope everyone had a nice Memorial Day weekend. I'm Jackson Brockway, Capital Planning and Budget Manager here for the Department of Finance. Want to just help kind of boot all of our collective brains up here on a Monday or Tuesday morning, whatever day it is. So before we get into hearing from all of our executive directors today, also wanted to discuss a little bit about the city's approach to reinvestment, i.e. putting dollars back into the assets that we have in our city, really focusing on the safety of our community. So we support a variety of things like paving roads, maintaining our bridges, supporting a variety of facilities needs, whether it's your HVAC systems, your fire alarms, what have you, also fixing our parks, our playgrounds, our cultural venues, all sorts of things. We do support that currently through the annual capital improvement program. This program invests about $100 million annually, give or take on the year, into these investments across all of our CIP funding sources. That is supported primarily by a 2.5 dedicated mill levy specifically for maintenance that was approved by voters in 2007. We can and do invest those dollars in reinvestment. So while this is a great deal of funding, that level falls far short, of our total maintenance needs across the city. So in 2024, the capital planning and programming team commissioned an infrastructure analysis report with Jacobs Infrastructure to really help us understand what are the total needs in our maintenance portfolio across all of our different assets. The result of that study identified about $2 billion of deferred maintenance needs across our community and across our different assets, with about $270 million of annual investments needed if one were to keep up with the standards of each and every asset across our community. So I think the one thing I want to point out there is investing in deferred maintenance is really critical. It helps ensure the safety of our buildings, our bridges, our roads, and really the assets that folks in the community use on a day-to-day basis. It helps us generate long-term cost savings by really avoiding some costly Band-Aid solutions. We might pay more money up front if something cannot be truly fixed the way it needs to be fixed. Can also create operational savings when we have more efficient buildings, if we're investing in HVAC or more efficient lighting, things like that. And supports the well-being of city staff and our residents alike. So as we start the conversations here today, we start talking about projects, you hear from executive directors. One thing that you'll hear from them may be about some of those reinvestment needs and kind of that deferred maintenance space. And so there has been some contemplation of allocating a portion of the bond par into some reinvestments in the city. These are things like fixing our roads, fixing our bridges, putting money back into facilities. I think you'll hear about that from our executive directors today. So did want to keep that in mind as we go through this process. For those who may have seen the Build Your Own Bond tool, we've currently put in a allocation there of about 20%. That's $160 million if you're doing the math. And so that is something that can be moved up or down. That is up to this committee to decide. Really just wanted to focus on that approach here as well. Some projects that have been through the subcommittees and are in front of you all through this process are reinvestment in nature. So something to keep in mind there. A lot of those that are moving through that process are projects that may not move through any other way but a bond. And so something to keep in mind as we think through those projects. So those can be recommended or those can be funded kind of in that reinvestment allocation or outside of that reinvestment allocation. So something to keep in mind. And that's really all I had for you all today. I just wanted to start off and make sure that we do take that time to think through. New investments are fantastic. There's a lot of great community needs out there, but we also need to make sure that we're taking some of these dollars and putting them back into our community for some of those assets. So with that, I'll pause for questions and or I can jump out and yield time to our executive directors.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So there's Jacob studies at $2 billion for maintenance.
Across all of our assets, that's correct. That's the total gap.
And what's it? I think it's 270 million and something else.
Yeah, so I think deferred maintenance and life cycle sustainment, I think you could simply enough, deferred maintenance is your catch up, your life cycle sustainment is your keep up. So we have that $2 billion gap. And then also if we were to kind of keep doing keep investing in our assets at a level, their recommendation was about 270 million. The current life cycle investment we're putting in is about 100 a year.
So Jackson, so your the 2.5% mill levy only raises 100 million per year.
It actually raises less than that. So the dedicated maintenance mills, it's hard to do mill math off the top of my head here in the morning, but it's about, I want to say it's just over $60 million a year. So we actually overfund our maintenance amount. And we do, that number also accounts dollars coming in from the Parks Legacy Fund, our Facilities Development Emissions Tax Fund. So that's really the totality of all CIP funding sources. That 2.5 maintenance mills is the majority, that is the biggest funder of that, plus or minus 100 million.
Yeah, and this is not your fault, but I mean, just everybody's edification to the extent that I can edify anybody. Long time ago, our CIP budget was 20 million. Many years probably before you were born. But the question I'm asking long term is the CIP budget really should be larger than 100 million per year, right? Because now we're using bond money for maintenance. And that's what confuses voters. Confuses us. Because bond money technically is not supposed to be used for deferred maintenance. Technically. So someone should talk about how in the long term we find a way as a city to increase CIP budget. Something. And then the other question I have is the 20% of this, first of all, 800 million, so someone decided that 20% should be for movement up or down, 20%.
That's a staff recommendation on, really helps us balance a variety of needs. Obviously, we have quite a large project list we're looking through in this process, and trying to strike that balance of how do we allocate funding to these capital improvements, to these new investments, while kind of targeting some of our, I would say, most critical safe infrastructure and the reinvestment side that really gets to primarily the things that have the highest safety risk for the community, making sure we're putting those investments in.
So just how this committee operates then, at the end of the day, we recommend up to something less than 20%, or are we supposed to use part of that 20% to fill in the gaps that we perceive over the next several weeks? How does, who makes the allocation? We do.
You will have final recommendations say to the mayor on what you believe the percentage should be.
So the 20% is just a straw proposal for staff.
Correct.
We could decide more of it should be dedicated to deferred maintenance or less of it. Right.
Yes, and the deferred maintenance is programs you'll see primarily. I mean, you could easily go through the project list and classify some of those projects as deferred maintenance inherently. So
that was the citywide stuff.
yeah,
Right.
well, kind of. There's two different asks. So you'll start to see reinvestment programs coming in that are something of a little different. They'll be flagged accordingly.
And are we going to hear those from the agency people this morning, or will that be a separate?
You will hear references to them today.
Okay.
And so following up on Happy's question, so then are we to decide the full 800 million, or is it 700 and something million minus the 20%?
The whole package, including the reinvestment for maintenance.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we will talk about this probably at every meeting.
Okay. And the big question I've always had, maybe I missed a meeting, I did miss a meeting, actually. Why 800 million? Why not a billion? Because the needs, Jacobs actually said was 7 billion.
We don't have capacity for 7 billion.
No, I know.
We're trying to stay below what our current capacity is in order to do this without having to raise taxes,
Right.
but also to make a significant movement towards catching up on some of the CIP and other needs of the city when it comes to
So
this.
it's because you don't want to increase the mill levy beyond the 800. So
Yeah, and that's been the case.
We went above 800, we have to increase the mill levy.
No, there's a little bit of flex there.
You see my point?
I do.
I mean, some mayor in the future is going to have 500. or $3 billion. So someone needs to think about long-term, how do we stagger so that we catch up someday and not always be behind 7 billion or 5 billion, whatever it is. Just something to think about.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I don't know that we'll ever get 100% caught up because there will always be this rolling need to maintain assets or grow as the city's population grows, build a new library, update a rec center. But I think not falling further and further behind.
But it's a decision about whether you want to invest in new things or just, as you said, keep up the things that we have now. So if we're always adding new things, we will never catch up. That's my point. So
Right.
someone just need to think about that. What's the policy, what's the long-term goal? It's both. Okay. I had to shut down a viaduct 3 months into my administration to do 3 and 3 on the national. So we don't need to shut down viaducts. And I don't want future administrations to have to worry about, ooh, somebody in the past didn't do the right investment. I got to shut down viaducts.
Murphy?
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Mr. Secretary, all the comments. It's really, well, it's really important, everything you're saying. Program and administration is at 5% at $40 million. Talk to me about what that includes.
Just take that? Sure.
Yeah.
I can address that. So that is administrative costs to be able to execute the programs. That is staff capitalization, that is program manager, that is controls, that is all of the things necessary to be able to execute the actual program. That's your project managers, that is your cost controls, that is your schedule management. That is all of the pieces that make the program actually happen.
Seems high.
That's a lot of money.
For a project, for a project manager, for each project, or, I mean, $40 million seems a lot. And then if we're capitalizing staff, how does that work? If we already have that budgeted in the general fund, how are you capitalizing staff in the fund project?
So, if the city didn't have any existing business, I would argue that you're probably not far off. But that's not the reality of the situation. The city has existing business going on. So what we're being tasked with is delivering $500,000 a day for 1,500 plus days, right? And to do that with existing staff, with their current workloads already at capacity, it's just not a realistic ask. So, given the nature of the work that we're talking about, these aren't easy projects that are on your list. These aren't light lists that is things that we're talking about. We do feel like it's a reasonable place to start the discussion. These are, I mean, there's gonna need to be an entire project management organization stood up to execute it, and it's gonna be one that's gonna have to be nimble and quick. And we're gonna be focusing on alternative deliveries, and we're gonna be focusing on things that aren't business as usual, because we don't have 10 years of revenue sets.
It's actually 5%, very small.
Yeah.
From a construction perspective,
late.
usually general conditions think about 10%.
Currently
In
rise,
terms of managing something this big, and so 5% is actually pretty high.
currently elevating rise is right about 4%.
All right, if there are no other questions for Jackson, thank you. I'm gonna try to get us caught back up on the agenda. Just a couple of notes. One of our co-chairs, Nicole Dehaney, is online. Christine Bonero is also online. And then I think Caitlin Stanger is also online. She was our other public speaker. No, maybe not. All right, and we're gonna move into agency presentations. Mr. Clerk and Recorder, you are first, and then Amy Dottie is after the Clerk and Recorder.
It's never too late to start talking about the next election, right? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can you see the presentation then?
Yeah, it'll be up on the screen.
Okay.
1 second.
Cool. Well, for those of you who don't know, I'm the clerk and recorder for the city and county of Denver. I serve as chief elections official. I marry folks. I record your documents when you're filing for foreclosure. We make sure that process is. We don't get involved in the foreclosure processes. We just make sure that the playing field is level, rules are the same. And sexy part is we oversee elections. There's no better. I have to open up by saying, I never thought in the space we are in elections in this country right now, but it's a really hard time for elections officials to be a clerk and recorder, but it's also the best time to be a clerk and recorder and be an election official. So I'm gonna whip through these pretty quickly. If you need me to pause, let me know. I just said that, so there you go. We are increasing population, but we are also increasing our voter registration numbers. We are over half of about 530,000 registered voters. That active participation is growing. So we're basically a victim of our own success. We'll talk about turnout and everything later. We do this in a very small building. Those of you who have done the tour, seen us, you see that we're crammed now with all those voters, with all our folks who are processing. We have 39 vote centers around the city. We have the largest number of boxes in the region in terms of drop boxes. Can somebody tell me how we vote in this city? Mail, drop box, and where else? In person. That in-person number is growing, unfortunately. Next slide, please. We basically were told by the feds in January during a joint elections official briefing in DC by the Department of Homeland Security, by the Cyber Information Security Agency, everything else that protects us, that we are on our own. It was probably the most bone-chilling, spine-tingling thing I've ever heard as an elections official. So executive orders, attempts to break into systems. We're on our own now. Influencing the election through third parties and rogue states, trying to influence that, folks that are trying to find information, those agencies are now hands off. So it's up to us. We need and we absolutely must be able to make sure, one, that our elections are secure, they're transparent, and people have access to vote. But don't worry, because we plan ahead. We've been doing tabletop exercises for every single scenario. And in every single scenario, whether we have to go back to a 2006 model, where we all have to go in person, where we all have to line up outside our firehouse or whatever precinct that we are assigned to, we can do it. Rest assured. However, the common problem in every scenario is the lack of space that we have to actually process these ballots, to store the ballots, to store our equipment. Next slide. Current needs. Right now, we're loading all of our ballot materials, all of our counting machines, everything that's secured. It's secured, but we're loading it. We're loading it into a back of an alley at night in the dark, and it does not look good for us when we do that, right? We have to throw away things in a dumpster, and these aren't things that we have to throw away that are sensitive, but they have our logos and stuff like that on it. We don't have docks. We have 2 elevators that are made for people, not freight. All of our equipment is stored like Legos and like Tetris in the basement of our building. If you look at those pictures, all of our election judges are not volunteer, they're paid by law. We have about 1,500 of them. We're all working like sardines next to each other. When we were going through the pandemic and had to be 6 feet apart, that was almost damn near impossible, right? We always have to rent out space. We have to rent out space from ourselves. We pay over $200,000 for facilities that we own, right? Just for that space. We do not have the sufficient space to be able to store all the city's records. Everything that was saved from the flood from the last city hall, we have, but they're under 3 terrible locations. One of which has already flooded in the basement of this building, garage. Right? So we need by law to be able to hold on to all these things. We're done scanning them, but we need to make sure that we're holding on to it. We have to store ballots 25 months after an election. 25 months. Those are all stored in like these shipping containers all around the city. We have no access to them on the regular basis. So secure loading docks. We are consolidating all of our staff, all of our functions, the 5 functions of the clerk and recorder's office. We're moving into the downtown, the Denver elections.
Mr. Clerk and Recorder, I hate to hurry you along, but I'm going to hurry you along.
Gotcha. Other cities, that's what their facilities look like. They're huge. They're shared, their deployment, their storage. That's what we lack. Mesa County has double the office space, double the processing space, half of the voters that we need. That's a county state in Colorado. Requirements and cost, when we first looked at it, next one, we're looking at 160 square foot facility. We're not trying to build from the ground up. We're trying to move into a warehouse or a old Albertsons or anything like that, old Kmart, something like that, which would allow us to deploy, store, and process safely. And do it moving forward, looking at, it's about 47 million what we're asking. I think what we're looking at is basically numbers that we've done our own math, and the city just has to verify the rest. It's not the 122 million that was originally proposed. A lot cheaper.
Yes.
Next one. Charter requirements. These are just two things that folks have to understand with our clerk and recorder's office. We're obliged to federal and state law to be able to run these elections and do them per state law. So when state law changes, says you need more vote centers, which they're doing right now, we need more equipment. Each vote center is about $175,000 worth of equipment and personnel that we have to move and set up. We have no more places to store those things, right? So we need to be able to do the things necessary for us to be able to have and continue to have elections, the top elections in the country, which we do. Next one. Equity considerations. My man, Dr. Sanders. You recognize that map, everybody? It's lack of sidewalks. It's a map that shows you lack of tree canopy. It's a map that shows you childhood poverty. It's a map that shows you inequity in the city. We all know this inverted L. We also see that inverted L, but we see it with folks who are not participating. And the low blue numbers is how you have folks that are not participating. How is it that Sun Valley, at this day and age, with this political environment, has less turnout and continues to have less turnout? Why is it that Mount Bello, Westwood, Harvey Park, Marley, GES continue to not vote? It's building that culture of participation. It's being able to get there. It's deploying all that material out there. We just opened our box out in Globeville. We can't do that if we do not have the space to continue to address it. The more people that show up in those light blue areas, the less likelihood, and the more that they participate in the political process, the less likely it is you're going to start to see that that inverted L exist in the future, right? Squeaky wheel gets the grease. As a councilman, I knew this, and it was my hardest, the hardest moment of my career, knowing that, and you know this is important as somebody that I worked with closely in Jolin. If you don't have voters in your council district and your precincts that are participating, the likelihood of them being ignored by the political process is huge. And it makes your job as a city councilman, no matter how badass of a city councilman you were, that much harder. So sorry to curse in public meeting. Next one. Outcomes. We need to mitigate significant risks. Number one, enhance the safety and security of our staff and election judges. We recently had to put bulletproof glass around our building. We've recently had to put bollards. We are still behind in terms of what's necessary per Department of Homeland Security to be able to make sure we contain things, make sure we mitigate risks. If somebody would bring a powdered letter into our facility, which they have before, we have to stop everything. There's no other facility that we can continue to do this in. So if somebody wanted to disrupt what we do, they could. They'd have to face us first and mitigate. We already have things that we've done, but the smaller the space, the more likelihood of that being a disaster is huge. Next one. Yep, that's it. So I don't know if there's any questions or anything like that, but essentially it's a deployment center. It's a storage facility for all of our records and potentially processing should we need that many folks. And this is what other counties do around the country in Colorado. And we just need to be able to continue to do what we do to protect the democracy. Yes.
Mr. Clerk, is there any matching grant money or dollars that the state provides that could help with this?
They come through the HAVA Act, the Help America Votes Act, and right now is all federal funds. A city like ours is being affected. So we have to do this, and hopefully in the future we are able to. Maybe the federal government wakes up and realizes that there are things that it has to fund, like its critical infrastructure when it comes to elections. No matter what state it is, blue, red, I don't care. We don't have access to that right now. We can't bet on it. But in the future, perhaps, for facilities like this, not really. It's more about boxes and everything else that we do. Equipment, that's where they come in. But we're competing with all the other smaller counties with that. Yes.
How does this facility get more votes out of the Sun Belt?
If we are able to put down a in-person vote center, 2 of them, Sun Valley has 1. If we are able, and as you know, they're going vertical, more people. If we are able to have an in-person hybrid vote center with a drop box, we need a place to store that drop box. We need to be able to store those facilities, right? All that equipment in a secured space. We do it, but we're going like this. We're moving materials around where we see it the greatest need. But it's hard to demonstrate in a democracy. Everybody has a right, an equal right to vote. I can't be choosing one neighborhood over the other. We have to make sure that every single neighborhood has access to that equipment, right? In order to have the equipment necessary, you have to have a place to store it that's secure. But now we're facing Mr. Mullis is not there.
Let's do one more question.
Yes, sir.
I have a couple of quick questions.
Yes.
What's the length of time for delivering this building? And I'm assuming the cost for an existing warehouse is not the lion's share of this 47 million, that it's the building improvements that are necessary to provide secure storage. So could you talk a little bit about what the breakdown of the costs and how much of it is acquisition, how much of it is adequately preparing the building?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that we're working on with the city to understand and to be able to do. So what they're looking at is a number between 47 million and 60 million to kind of look at that one, because we have to have cameras, has to be secure. We have to have facilities necessary. You can't have water sprinklers over some of this equipment or some of our records, right? We didn't save them from the floods just to douse them in a fire. Right, so they have to have a pressurized, kind of a carbon.
So would you like me
There
to
you go.
address that? Yeah, so there's a dual activation system that you would want for a record system like this, would require the alarm and a fire head to be broken, or 2 fire heads to be broken, which is standard for records retention facilities. The acquisition, it would depend on what we were able to find, right? So if we were able to find things that were convertible from, like using the LA model that he referenced, it was a Fry's warehouse, so like a Best Buy or something like that, that already had security infrastructure, already had fire sprinklers that were set up for a dual activation system, then we would pay more on the acquisition because the renovation costs would go down. So it would scale dependingly. But the program has some scalability to it, and we would try to scale the acquisition to the needs of the facility.
And of course, this building has to be inside the boundaries of the city county.
It does.
And we'd like it, to be somewhere, I mean, we'll take what we can get essentially and what's available. It's just that it's the space that we need to be mindful of. Right now, we're using the atrium and we're renting out other facilities temporarily. But I think something like that to continue to move everything. It also frees up space in the city and county of Denver as well too. Records, office, consolidation, everything. So yeah.
Mary?
I guess I'm a little confused because the funding amount is 122 million. The paperwork we have, and you're saying it's 60 million. So what's that disparity?
So there's a revision. So they had submitted for 40 million originally. And the way that the process worked is we took in from different submittals and we ran it through our technical review process. And we ran based on what we could find at 160,000 square foot, which is not available to purchase. It is only available to build. So those are all new build numbers. The clerk looked at their program, revised their program down to square footage that we could potentially buy a building. And we are rerunning those numbers now. They believe that that would be around 47 million. We think that that's much more achievable. And we're working through those now. So you will see a revision of that proposal coming through.
All right, Mr. Clerk and Recorder, thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you all.
Amy, you are up. Just a reminder for everybody, we are recording this, so we will have the recording available for everyone, especially the executive committee members. We also will email you all of these presentations right after the meeting, so you will have the backup material as well.
Thank you. So we may have violated a no paper rule. There are a couple of elements on this presentation that are hard to read, so we printed them out just for you all for benefits and for those of you online. Presentation. Flip to the next slide.
So you owe Parks and Recreation for that.
I do. I owe paper there. I'm Amy Ford. I'm the executive director here at Dottie, and we have two pieces of placemat that tells you who Dottie is. But we build the building that the clerk just spoke about. We build all of the streets, maintain all of the streets. We manage your solid waste. We manage if you flush it or it comes through in the storm, we take care of it. That is who we are. We're cool. We are the people who also are managing that program management and otherwise working with us and others. And I want to talk though about connectivity because that's why we're here today to talk about the connectivity subcommittee. And I want to start with the North Star. The North Star for transportation and how we think about transportation in Denver is Denver Moves Everyone. And this is a summary of our Denver Moves Everyone plan, which outlines also our 6-year capital improvement plan, which really says what we think and what we believe in transportation and how we move forward as a city, how we move and how we build to that move, how we think about affordable trips, how we think about zero fatalities on our infrastructure, how we think about sustaining our climate and environment, how we think about using land and use and transportation as a way of jumpstarting investments in affordability and our community and access for all. If you could flip to the next slide. When we talk about the street system, I wanted to just give you a sense of what we talk about when we look at the city and county of Denver. So the vast majority of our streets are streets that are local neighborhood streets. The arterial roadways, when you see this, are the big ones. They are often state highways, Federal Boulevard, Colorado Boulevard, Alameda. And so I wanted you to see and understand that as we talk then about investments and where we're going and how to give you a sense of the grid that we have here in the city and county of Denver. If you flip to the next slide. So what does it take to make a transportation network? Why am I showing you this? As a follow-on for the conversation that Jackson just started, we want to understand that it's not just about asphalt and that street that you see in front of you. There's a lot of pieces that play into what it makes for a transportation network. From our signals, to the paving, to the bridges that you drive over, to the signs and the individual markings that you see on a roadway, to the assets that allow people to use our mobility system, how we think about curb and gutter, to even the system operations behind the scene, the fiber that drive that, to ADA ramps and crosswalks. All of those pieces comprise a transportation whose sole focus is to keep people moving to their jobs, to their employment, to their kids' games, to how we improve quality of life through the city. You can flip to the next slide. But what makes it great? A great street and a great neighborhood street is one that is multi-use. It is one that has slow speeds. It's one that has slow intersections. It's one that creates traffic environments that allow everyone to be able to use the street, from pedestrians, to cyclists, to people who drive. And it allows for that kind of multi-use throughout the street. And that is what we're shifting and driving to. When we talk about our DME goals, that Denver Moves Everyone goals, we're transitioning also from the street that was just pavement and curbs and others, and transition to how we think about the human services and the mobility services that lay on top of those. And the investments that you have in front of you drive to some of this. Next slide, please. So you asked, I think, in the last session, and I've got my colleagues here to answer some of those questions, like, does it matter? When we make those investments, does it matter in how people choose to use our streets? And the short answer is yes, it does. And so infrastructure does drive mobility patterns, mobility habits, and change. And so when we talk about neighborhood street investments, those street investments, for instance, that increase sidewalks or add protected bike lanes or do slow and safe improvements, they do have an impact on how people move. And as you saw in DME, we have goals of how people move in this city, because we certainly can't build our way out of the congestion on Colorado Boulevard. We know we have to create multi-use and how we thrive and keep the city moving. So we know that we see when we actually put investments in for bicycling and cycling, that over the last several years, we've seen an increase of 92% in that. Small example, in the Montbello neighborhood, we invested in what we call the community transportation network. We saw an increase of almost 30% in that community of people biking and scooting and others when we put those kinds of investments in. We see investments on how it slows vehicle travel and speeds in neighborhood streets when we go. You flip to the next slide, please. And it also makes a difference in safety. So I won't go through all of the elements, and these safety investments you'll see threaded through projects. It's signal timing, it's new signals, it's better crossings, it's shortening, narrowing streets so that people don't have to cross as far. It's things that help slow speeds down, like speed cushions and otherwise. All of those elements do things like not one more life lost on our roads and increase in mobility. We can flip to the next. So when we look at the lists that you have in front of you, and we sit and we talk about Dottie, I wanted to sort of let you know a couple of things. Every project on that list aligns with our 6-year capital improvement program, every single one. And you'll see some areas that are programmatic investments. And programmatic investments for us are a way to group and collaborate on things like signals or on areas like paving, well, we'll get to that, neighborhood street improvements, slow and safe improvements that are high impact, similar to some of the stats you're doing, with ability to sort of spread out address the very big needs that we see all throughout our community, that every single public meeting we get, we have someone say, gosh, could you put a crosswalk here? Please, could you put a flashing beacon here in front of this school? All of the estimates that you see look super high on these projects. I want you to also understand that they are all very scalable, not too dissimilar from what Dirk just talked about. Each of these projects have scalable options in them. And so our team, and we can sit down and talk with you about how that all works when we look at these investments. And lastly, a big thing you'll see when I talk about my list is readiness. So you can flip to the next slide. So reinvestment. Jackson did a really good job of sharing many of our talking points when it comes to reinvestment. But this is maintenance. And I just want to add a couple of notes when it comes to our streets and our built infrastructure. One of the slides that you didn't see is that our street investments, it's approximately 80% of the public space and the use space that we have as a city is invested in those roads, those bridges, those signals, et cetera. We are the bulk of what we invest in the city. How we maintain that, how we keep it safe, how we ensure, Secretary, that we don't have a bridge that you have to close 3 weeks after you come in. That is what reinvestment means. Bond is really our one chance to catch up on our backlog. It's $1 billion backlog. What you see here on the right on that chart is a total need that we have in the different programs and assets that we have, and then what the proposed scenarios are in this reinvestment. A couple of notes, just the difference. You're going to see bridge on here, but then you're going to say, gosh, I have bridge projects on these other lists. What's the difference? The bridge projects that you see on the other lists are really bridge projects that include multimodal investments on those bridges, which will also address very clear maintenance needs. The ones that you see here in this investment is ensuring that those bridges are kept in good, fair condition. And we have several, 2 in particular, that are very quickly moving to a not in good condition status, which means that you start doing things like changing the use of those bridges, load restricting them and other things. So this list here, I think, is critically important. We ask that you give it your very biggest due consideration. We do focus on the worst is first with things like just repairing our traffic signals, ensuring that our fiber is up and running so you can keep those traffic signals moving, and how we continue to address our streets and just good repair. You can flip to the next slide. So when we talk then about programs, I mentioned to you sort of what makes good neighborhood streets, and we talk about sort of how we group the investments together. And so some of the conversations that you'll be having with council and otherwise is you'll see groupings of different investment categories. From pedestrian crossings to signals, to how we invest in multimodal and transit, to how we think about things like traffic calming and closing people down. You're going to see a number down here, and that number, just so you're clear, it seems like a new number we're introducing, meets to that 6-year CIP, basically the overall need that we see in our Denver Moves Everyone if we were to try to meet all of our goals by 2040 and 2050. So that too is a very high number. What you have in front of you on your list are scalable programs that address those needs. You'll also see council members and others, and we are welcoming that, to identify certain projects within these groupings of programs to be able to say, hey, this one is really critically important as we move those programs together. So we ask, obviously, for the continued consideration of spreading those dollars through this low cost, high impact kind of investment across the city that allows us to really address needs throughout. Last slides. So when we talk about multimodal projects, the lists that you have are extensive. They all meet our 6-year CIP. And so you say, okay, well, what do you, Dottie, really care about? These are some of the criteria that we place in front of those projects, of which our committee and our subcommittee carefully looked through as well with us. And that shovel readiness to load choice to our equity alignment. And they group them in 3 categories. So you can flip to the last slide, and then I'll close it with questions. And just leave this here. So the projects that you see on this list, and this is why we gave you the paper, because there's a lot of words here. These are all projects that meet that prioritization. They are projects that we believe have high impact in our community. From the West 38th multimodal aspects and improvements, it is a shovel-ready project that we are getting ready to go hit the ground, literally running. Federal Boulevard multimodal improvements to go with the extensive planning that has been happening about high capacity mass transit in that area, along with major safety improvements in the corridor that we know is one of the very worst in the city. In fact, one that we just had 2 fatalities on, pedestrian fatalities here in the last 3 weeks. We talked about bridges. There are 2 critical bridges that we think are really important for not just investment in safety and our reliability of our infrastructure, but also continued economic investment on 6th and 8th, as well as safety in the northeast and Tower Road. How we look at our streets as public space is also a critically important element. And you've seen transitions of this when we look at corridors like the planning that we're doing with Athens Street, how we think about node and place, and how we think about that infrastructure is not just pavement or something where you move people, but how you congregate and create community. And these are investments that you've seen us talk about, from like Santa Fe streetscape to how we move forward and thinking about what is a festival corridor straight in front of Denver Union Station. Lastly, on the complete streets design, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of these, all of these are ones that you have been in the community, you've heard community members talk about, of, gosh, you should do something about. Gosh, you should do something about. And these are the plans that do something about. And so you see them here as how you think about two-waying our downtown streets to Stout, to how you think about true safety improvements on 13th and 14th as it extends east. And these are the areas where we think are our highest priorities. So I'll stop, and I'd love to have questions and others we got.
Thank you. Questions?
Questions on the numbers real quick.
Yeah, Moira.
So you have 160 million, which is reinvestment or deferred
Yes.
at 20%. Is this additional 140 million, or is that in this 160 million number?
That is embedded in the number that Jackson is speaking about. So we are the bulk of that reinvestment.
Is that the 140 million that's on?
That's correct. Yeah,
That's included.
that's included, yes.
And then following page where you have the mobility programs, that totals another 153 million.
On these mobility programs here?
Yes.
Yes, so those numbers, and it probably would be better, I wanted to demonstrate to you that there are investments through the city that help us meet our mobility goals. Those are the numbers over the course of 20, 30 years. What you have in front of you on your tiered project list are these categories at a much, much more scaled number that we think we should achieve in this year, or in this one.
Any other questions, Randy?
So the Dottie Library's Denver priorities, this is the group of projects that you think are the most critical and you will allow $140 million.
No, these groups are in addition to. So there's the reinvestment dollars that are just simple, maintain the system that we have, improve it, improve the safety of the system that we currently have. That's the reinvestment category, that is the $140 million. The list of projects that you have here is what is Mayor Focus new. What did we rebuild? What did we add? What did we change to really address the safety and mobility needs that help us achieve our priority mobility?
Wait a minute, I'm confused. So this page here.
Yep.
So none of these are in that $140 million.
But the reinvestment dollars, this list right here.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
this one's the top of the one.
No, yeah, I'm asking the
So
connection between
this-
this and the one that is the
So,
reinvestment.
so you all were presented by our committee, our safety, our connectivity subcommittee, a list of projects. This list right here is our prioritization of that list of projects that you received from your subcommittee. What the subcommittee did not talk to you about was reinvestment on a regular maintenance perspective. The reinvestment slide is a regular maintenance
Got it.
piece.
So this is at the top.
It's on top of
So
this.
what total is this?
This total, well, it depends on how much of the project we build. So I can give you that. I think this total, I'd have to do the math on it. Actually, I didn't do it deliberately for that reason, as you all are looking through your changes. I'd have to go back and look, you guys, probably, we think probably $300 to $400 million. I would say give or take, and I can go back and do the math for you, Secretary, on that. Absolutely. Yeah, and I do want to point out though, and the point that I made earlier, that these projects are scalable. So I'll use an example, 17th and 18th, transit project, actually, it's not on here. The project that is the 13th and 14th safety improvements is an $83 million project in that list that you guys received from the subcommittee. That is scalable. That could be a $20 million investment that we make certain investments on. It could be a $50 million investment, or it could be a full $83 million investment.
So, Amy, first of all, thank you for this work. It's
Yeah.
very complicated.
It
I
is.
appreciate the detail of the work that you and your team have done. But throughout the document that I read earlier, there were statements about this may turn out to be not feasible.
Yes, there are a couple of projects.
We're going to evaluate this.
Yes.
It's conceptual. So it wasn't shovel ready. It wasn't, we've already done the analysis. We know we can convert the street
Right.
without any problems. How do we as a committee think about deciding to provide $400 million if it turns out a year and a half from now, $100 million is not ever going to be used? Because it wasn't feasible or something didn't work out. How do we think about it? Or how do you think about it?
No, it's a very fair question. Number one, we'll always use the money. No, but the short
Those are
answer,
other priorities.
exactly.
We got people asking for parts and all kinds of
I know.
stuff. Every dollar is important here.
100%. And the short answer is we wanted to be flagging that particular list that you all received is those projects that have been part of the 6-year planning process, that have been part of a pre-development process, have been part of a design process, and those projects that are ready to move, especially in the shortened time frame of a bond. So this particular bond is going from 10 years to 6 years, which means that we want to be able to start the impact of the development and construction of these projects as quickly as we possibly can. So those projects that you saw on the list were projects that were not on our 6-year CIP. They were still fantastic and great ideas. Yard Walk was one of them, as an example. That does not mean that we cannot move and quickly work on design and planning, but it is difficult for us then to do the estimating on that project for your clarity and understanding. And then execute that project in the shorter time frame that we have for the project, which is why you saw shovel ready as being one of our criteria. It is not to mean that they are not good programs and not good ideas. And what it would mean is we would also take those ideas and move them into what is a living document for us, this 6-year planning process, and start moving them in so that maybe we could also get them ready for the next bond. So that pre-work that we do with our team and our staff is what leads to some of these projects being on the list versus others right now. That helps.
It does. I have many more questions, but we don't have time.
Okay. Also, I just want to point out that every one of the projects on this slide, the one that Ben has open, is listed individually on the build and bond tool spreadsheet.
Right.
So,
Right. And again, this whole presentation is so detailed and takes so much of the assets that are proposed. I don't know if we have enough time to go through all the questions. I don't know for the members. I got a zillion.
yeah, I think what we'll do is probably at the next meeting, come back and continue to dive deep on.
And we and our staff can come back and have those individual conversations. Should that be questions that you have that we can help answer?
Yeah.
And maybe I can send you my questions in advance.
That'd be great. We'd be happy to do that.
So I have a procedural question, because we piggybacks on that. Some of the projects that may not be shovel ready are those that were high priorities for the council districts. I'm curious about procedurally whether or not, as you look at scaling these, that we could see an analysis with the new information that we have now from council members about those priorities. Because I noticed there were some discrepancies between what the agency priorities were for connectivity and some of those projects and what the council members. I'd be curious to know what it looked like if the council priorities were considered as the top priorities for the connectivity. And, we had a little bit more of meeting of the minds and how that addresses the scalability issue.
Absolutely. We can absolutely come back and chat about that. And we worked actually to also align this with what we saw were council priorities. This obviously isn't complete, in regards to all of the priorities, but yeah, we could absolutely have that conversation. There are some that have been new. I'll use Councilman Sawyer, Lowry Boulevard region is an example of one that hasn't hit a planning process yet. So it would take us some time to get into that priority design and other ones.
We'll send the executive directors an updated city council member priority spreadsheet that they sent. Council President Sandoval sent to the executive committee on Friday, so we'll make sure you have that so you can kind of cross-check.
Thank you.
All right, Amy, thank you very much. Joan, you are up, and then Gretchen, you are after that.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for your time. Doing Parks and Recreation.
I'll bring my props the next time too. We're cool. We have big trucks.
Former environmental educator, so I had to bring some show and tell. This is Parkhill Dave. A month ago, he was living wild on the former Parkhill golf course. Of course, as we're preparing to open that as Parkhill Park this summer, couldn't just have a wild dog going around. After many attempts, he was very good at not getting caught. We finally caught him with a trap and a juicy steak, brought him into custody with Denver Animal Shelter. They scanned him. He had a microchip and had a really tough life leading up to this and had nowhere to go. So I adopted him and we're putting him to work here at Parks and Recreation. I did get a question from the shelter when I was adopting him because I've been telling everyone that he was going to go chase geese like our dogs on the golf course. And they said, well, he seems to have a track record of getting free. So do you have more of an office job you can put on? So if anyone sees Melanie from the animal shelter, please report back that you saw Parkhill Dave at the bond meeting doing office work all year. I'm going to jump right in because as you've seen, today is a quick overview of department priorities. We're not going to have time to get into the depth. I have 50 slides in here. You're going to have the slide deck. My door is always open. I also have Gordon and Owen and Emily here with me. We are at your disposal to answer any questions. So I'm not going to get through all of this. I'm going to really focus on just a few things here. So if we can go to the next slide. This is a great slide to just cruise over. We have a massive system of, you think parks, you don't think about all the buildings that we have, not just rec centers, 2 herd of bison. So this is a snapshot of what we have ranked now number 10 in the country using TPL's park score as of last week. So I'm not going to go too in depth in that, but take a look at that as a reminder of just how big our system is. On the next slide is our equity map. We take the city's inverted L equity map, but we overlay park specific metrics on top of that. And the department has done a really good job long before I was here at really targeting investment in those areas. This is one of the few maps where you will see Globeville in a different color than you usually see it on the map because of the investment, the number of dollars and projects that we have done in that area in a concerted effort to change the color. And so that's why we take the existing stuff, and we're not solving all of those problems, but we are overlaying the parks metrics on top of it. And that is where we concentrate our investments to try to move the needle when it looks at equity from a parks lens. On the next slide, I'm not going to talk, this is just some of the things that we use as a department as we're working towards our priorities. And this next slide is one of the most important ones. This is our priority list from an agency. You also see city council priorities. You'll see things coming in from the public. There were well over 1,000, maybe 1,500 projects that our team vetted that came in from the public to look at. But these are our internal priorities for us as an agency. I'm going to focus the most of my time today, next slide please, on our number 1 priority, because I think generally you've got, we reported up to 2 different subcommittees, our facilities in one place, and then the parks in a different place, and you have the information from those subcommittees and that tiering, and generally we agree with that. The subcommittees did a great job looking through that and vetting through those 1,000+ projects that were parks and recreation related, but I don't think there was enough information for the committee on this project, and so we do disagree with the tiering on this one, and so I want to flag that. Part of why I brought Parkhill Dave. Nobody knows these 155 acres as well as he does after living for over a year out there by himself. This is a huge priority for us. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity for the city. It is the largest acquisition of private property for parkland in Denver history. And when it opens, it will be the largest park opening since Washington Park opened in 1911. This is really a historic project that will not be possible to deliver for the community in the way that the community is expecting without bond support. And that's why this is an opportunity. There are lots of different ways to deliver a playground. There are not a lot of ways to deliver a regional park of this size in the fashion that the community has asked us to on this. If you go to the next slide, please. Here's just a picture. Next slide, please. As you can see, we are already well underway. We've already jumped full feet in. We used our on-call contracting process to bring on a top firm to lead the community in visioning. But the important part about this 155 acres is we are not starting from zero. Oftentimes when we purchase a new piece of property for a park, we are starting from zero. It's an area that was an identified need, but we don't know what the community wants. There has been no conversation about what a park would look like there. That is not true for this parcel. This conversation has been going on for many years, and the community has weighed in through city processes and our small area plan process on what they wanted out of a park. That park at that time was not envisioned to be all 155 acres, so there is work to do to expand that canvas, but we have heard loud and clear from the community, and one of the things that the community has told us is, please don't start over and ask us again. We've told you what we want out of a park. We've told you what we want beyond the boundaries of that park now. In the original agreement, that small area plan had a community benefits agreement, and they've asked us to try to see if we can fit some of those things within the rules of parks into this 155 acres. And there's a process to look at what happens outside of that to deliver things like affordable housing and a grocery store that can't be delivered on these 155 acres. So we are doing that visioning, building on top of what the community has already done, the conversations that have already happened. And we already have, these are some pictures of our family field day. This is well underway, and we'll have an open house on June 7th where we will already have 3 frameworks in front of community to respond to. We will be wrapping up our visioning before the end of this year on this project, and we are already working on the RFP for design. So it will be going into design in hopefully in Q1 of next year. This is a project that we will be ready to deliver on this timeline that can't be delivered without bond support, and that has massive community support, and heard input from voters all across the city on wanting this to be a park. And so that's why this is our #1 priority coming into this. A couple other slides that I have just with visioning. This next one is again working through kind of those guiding principles, not on what are we building, what does the community want it to look like, also dovetailing in with all those conversations that already happened about community benefits and looking at the existing conditions. And then this last slide on Park Hill is, I think, the most important slide. We already know a ton of what this park needs, and this park cannot function. Yes, we will have it open this summer for passive use for Park Hill Dave on leash this time to take a walk through, and for folks to start using it, and we'll be able to add some small amenities. But there are fundamentals here that make this park really unusable as a regional park until we make this investment. There's no lighting in the middle of this park. There's 155 acres and you get in the middle of there and there is no lighting. And so we can't keep this park open normal park hours on day one because it wouldn't be safe in the middle of it. And so there's a fence around the park right now that we will be opening and closing, but we won't be able to take it down like the community wants us to until we have some safety improvements, until we can really lay out the paths and the roads and the parking and the lighting. And you'll see on this list, again, what we have heard from community time and time again through these processes, and we're continuing to hear through this visioning, and you will see on June 7th in these frameworks, this list of things that we know the community wants and that we know that we can deliver. And then we will be ready to go from visioning into designing exactly where in the park do these things go. We also have a lot of partners. This is again, a once in a lifetime opportunity. We have partners coming forward and saying, hey, we want to, from the philanthropic community, add money to this project and help support some of these things. We have people especially in the athletic space coming forward and saying, this is something Denver desperately needs and Denver youth desperately needs that we don't have another opportunity for. And we want to partner to make that happen. We can't accept those funds. We can't move forward on those parts of the project if we haven't done the base layout and getting the safety, getting the utilities, getting the paths, getting the pad sites ready for all of these things. And we can't do that without bond support. And if we miss this opportunity to move on this project right now, that land is going to sit as a park with a fence around it that a gate can open for 6 to 10 more years. And that is not what the community is asking us at all these meetings to do. It is asking us to move quickly. This has been a parcel that has been very controversial. And we're hearing stories that people are talking about neighbors that they have who used to go walk their dogs at the same time and would cross the street because they couldn't stand to talk to each other anymore because this has been so contentious. We're now coming together at these meetings and on Facebook pages saying, hey, you know what would be really great at this new park that we're going to share is bringing community together. And we can continue to do that, but it will take an investment from the bonds to move this project forward. And that's why you'll see it at the top of our list. I think Evan is going to start yanking me soon if I don't leave time for questions. Like I said, I have 50 slides in here, and we have a lot of other priorities: reinvesting, reimagining, taking our rec centers to that next level, and lots of projects. And I'm happy to answer those questions, but I felt like if I could leave you with one thing today, it's that I feel like we missed the mark in the subcommittees, and not their fault. There just wasn't that level of information. We were so focused on getting information on the 1,000+ projects that we had in front of them to give them all that we did not get into this level of detail on this project. And that was a missed opportunity. And I didn't want to start this process missing that opportunity again. So I think I will pivot to questions because I think I only have about 5 minutes left. Yes.
Thank you for your presentation, Executive Director. 3 questions for you, and I'll give them all to you, and then you can decide how you answer them. Number 1, Park Hill has a rich history in which the community have heard many, many times that it's losing that history with the people who have had to move on because of all things. And so how do you plan on capturing the history of Park Hill in this park and helping people understand who bring their poo-poo dogs and just moved into Park Hill not too long ago, what Park Hill was all about for many, many years? That's number 1. Number 2, this has a high operating cost, or the operational impact. And given the fact that the mayor just announced furloughs and layoffs and all that kind of stuff, what is the impact to your general fund, and how do you plan on supplementing that? And have you already allocated that funding for this park? And what does that look like? And then number 3 is the scalable. Are you able to scale? It's $125 million set here, but could you take that and scale that over time, especially if you're talking about philanthropy and everything else helping you?
Yeah, absolutely. And as quickly as I can, absolutely capturing the history inside the park. We're also working with the broader group that is working at what happens outside the park on some anti-displacement tools to really hopefully keep folks in that community and not in displacement, as was part of that CBA, but absolutely looking through these frameworks at how do we honor that history, the role that the clubhouse played for the Park Hill community, but that history around the park will absolutely be a part of what we're building. Yes, operating costs of a new regional park are high. In the short term, we will minimize that because we aren't able to, in July when we open it, have it open and look like a full regional park. It will really be for walking, for taking your dog in there. So we minimize operational costs in the short term. That gives us several years until the park is built and open. Within that horizon for the bond easily, but 4 or 5 years to figure out operationally how we step up to the full level of operation that you would need on a park. We also have the advantage that the Park Legacy Fund, which is where all of the funds to acquire the property came from, also very clearly allow for operations for our new assets to come out of there as well. In the short term, we'll be pivoting towards that since the general fund is so strapped, so there will not be an impact to the general fund in the short term as the city is facing general fund problems. We'll be pivoting some of our dollars in our legacy fund to make sure that we can operate. And the project is absolutely scalable. What you see at 125 million is not the total cost to fully build out park. That is a scale option for it. We need to, make sure that we're doing, the nuts and bolts, the utilities, some of the core features like playgrounds, and you'll see it, destination kind of water feature that the community is really asking for. But it may leave, even at that scale, we'll leave areas that will be more, it will look like park. It will be, native grasses, but maybe that is the future home of a sports complex like the community's been asked for, that we need to build that partnership with and isn't ready to move until we do these types of investments. So that 125 is a scaled back version of what a regional park like this costs.
Happy. I have a couple questions. Thank you. If we could come back to the scalability on this project. It's your number 1 priority, but you do have others. And so how would you consider some of those first tier within the first tier projects to get the park rolling, that also allows you to address some of your other priority concerns? Have you given that some consideration?
Yeah,
Ballpark.
certainly our hope that this is not the only piece in this puzzle. And again, we will deliver as much as we can with as much as we can get out of this bond. And we will supplement, as we always do, with our other sources of revenue while continuing to deliver on our, our 6-year CIP list and the other things, as you know better than anybody in this room. I think that, for us, we do imagine that this is the opportunity. This is a bond is primed to go big on parks and recreation. When we talk about vibrant communities and those investments and a once in a lifetime opportunity, we see this as additive and the opportunity to go big on Park Hill, but also go big on delivering park projects and recreation projects in neighborhoods all across the city. And so we see this as a yes and moment to really stretch and look at what is the full capacity of the bond to deliver. Over the years, various bonds have always delivered for all of the different departments in the city, and we get people are start throwing stuff at me. But for instance, Elevate was more focused on transportation and mobility, and we see with this once in a generation opportunity with Park Hill, this is an opportunity to pivot the bond and not to the exclusive, not exclusively, but to really look at a big investment in Park Hill, but also a big investment across the system. But you'll see that we do have things ranked out. We can scale scope on projects and not deliver everything that we would like to. You cannot get to everything on our list, and we can scale, those projects back and still deliver high quality projects, just not with all of the amenities that the community has.
So one of the two other quick questions. One of the things we talked about was other sources of funds that either offset or add to these. And you mentioned the legacy fund. So a big chunk of the legacy fund was used for acquisition. How much do you anticipate continuing to draw from that source that may have an impact on other projects going forward?
Yeah, right. Right now we're working through that, and there will obviously be an impact as we continue to scale operations and everything. But we've seen a ton of growth in the legacy fund. When it was first passed by voters in 2018, it was about $40 million, and we're around more like 53 this year. So as we continue to grow, we're also able to program some of those operational things in there, and have kept our capital budget to match our bond projects and our CIP investments very robust, and continue to look at growing that as well, in addition to our other capital funds.
And so finally, related to other alignment with other projects, to your point, Murphy, about the history, one of the projects that's in connectivity is the 303 Archway, and I know some of that intersects with, so is that something that is prioritized within this park project?
Yes, yep, you'll see that in all of our frameworks. In addition to, there's a memorial grove that was put in, and we also are working with those families and incorporating that into all of the different frameworks.
Thanks.
Happy. John, thank you very much. Thanks for bringing Park Hill Dave with
I
you.
believe he was wild and free a month ago. I could leave my side. Thank you all very much. And again, we are available for any other questions that you might have.
Thank you. Gretchen?
It's hard to follow Park Hill Day.
But we have a bear. It's too hard to bring into the room. Thanks for the time today. I'm Gretchen Holler. I'm the Executive Director of Denver Arts and Venues. We've got two other team members here. Jen Morris is our Deputy Director, and John Graham is our Director of Capital and Sustainability. I'll do a really quick overview of who we are and then focus on 5 projects that we wanted to have the committee consider. And they are our by far highest 5 priorities. So we are the city agency responsible for operating some of the region's most renowned venues, including the Red Rocks, the Arts Complex. But we also oversee the Convention Center, we oversee Nichols Building, the Coliseum. And if you haven't, and the city's public art program. If you haven't been to those venues, you should see me after bond class so that we can talk about how to get there. It's really unusual, this model in the nation, that a city owns and operates these types of venues. It's a unique structure that's really unique to Denver. What that lets us do is what we call good times for good. So we'll skip ahead a couple of slides. Keep skipping. Good times for good. So all of the good times that happen at our venues generate the revenue that we are able to bring back to arts and culture in Denver, including free or low-cost community cultural events, That's how we do grants to artists and arts organizations, venue maintenance and arts education. So that is what we call Good Times for Good. I'm going to jump right into the 5 projects that we wanted to have you consider. Each of these, and we're going to start with Betcher, each of these have had some level of preliminary or concept design, so they are all shovel ready. Betcher is our highest priority, and this has been a subject of discussion over the past 15 years. This building is at the end of its life cycle. Our request as the city's agency is a companion request to what the symphony has requested on their own for the programming that will be delivered through an enhanced Betcher concert hall. So there's a description of what the scope of the renovation is, but it really touches just about every part of the facility. We have been keeping that building going, and it's true both that there are still great concerts and great performances that happen in Betcher. It's also true that it is one of the oldest and the oldest concert symphony hall in the round facility in the United States. And so our team believes this is the right time with the right leadership for the symphony, with the high need of the building for this project to finally be delivered. It has been talked about in the next stage and the next stage and the project formerly known as the next stage. This is a project that the other resident companies, the Symphony, the Opera of LA and the DCPA, who produce theater and present Broadway, have lined up behind. And it is fundamental to keeping our arts complex downtown in great shape. So there was right before the pandemic, we did an economic study that was 2018 to 2019. We have 1.3 million visits to the arts complex annually. We have 250,000 student visits to the arts complex, and we have over $300 million worth of economic impact annually to the city and county of Denver from the arts complex. This is a major missing component that we would like to emphasize for renovation. 125 million is really the lowest cost that we've seen for this, and I want to thank our partners at the Arts Complex for bringing this cost down from a $220+ million cost estimate that had been originally imagined. This addresses the building within its current 4 walls primarily, and a lot of different concepts over the years. So I do think this fits the needs of the building. It also allows it to tap into a geothermal system. So we call this project Betcher 2.0. We are working on Betcher 1.5 right now, including the installation of this geothermal, but the new facility then taps into what that provides for energy savings. So that's it's a current commitment that we're making with the hopes that we'll be able to finally address this facility. I will keep going given time. There are naming rights opportunities, and the Betcher Foundation has given us some permission to consider a Betcher concert hall within inside a larger symphony center. So there's some opportunity there. Laredo Heights Parking Garage. This is a project that was part of the former bond program. The parking garage was originally included in that. So we are renovating in Southwest Denver really a local theater that can support local arts organizations, allow them to use and present lower cost community-based theater programming, dance, music. It's a 750 seat theater as we renovate it. That typically requires 375 to 500 parking spaces, and we have 50. And the reason it was removed was just for the escalated costs and completing a full renovation of the existing historic property meant we had to touch it. We had to take it down to the bricks and build back. So that's a $60 million project now without a parking garage. And keep going.
Rachel, can you just touch on real quick
Sure.
what happens if you don't build that garage?
We will use the existing parking spaces. We will try to work with DSST, the DPS school that's on site, to come up with something that is usable. We have not had much success in that conversation so far because though there is a daytime, nighttime shared parking possibility, their hours are expanded, and we also have matinees to be able to use it for community and educational programming. So we would work hard. It would probably limit the use of the theater until we could figure this out. Third, Red Rocks backstage expansion. This is all about improving accessibility and bringing this venue
which feeds the arts and culture organizations in Denver up to tier with the competing venues. So you have noticed there are many more venues coming online for the amphitheater. Dillon Amphitheater in the mountains just went through a major renovation, Mission Ballroom, keep going. This is really the last piece of Red Rocks that needs a significant upgrade. Issues like a really significant steep ramp to bring artists onto stage. So think about Diana Ross in a wheelchair, really tough back of house scenario. It's built into the rocks. We would keep a lot of that, but this basically brings us up into a modern and accessible facility so that we can continue to compete nationally and on the world stage with Red Rocks. And I think most people are familiar with that. I'm just going fast. We'll come back to questions. Garden Gallery, theater renovation. This is one, we're back to the arts complex. This is one of the last retail spaces under the garage. The garage is staying. There was a lack of investment in these spaces while the next stage conversation was going on, whether or not the garage would remain or be torn down. It's clear to us now that we are working on a venture renovation. We want to work on this garage experience. So this theater really offers a unique kind of programming, 200 seats, cabaret style theater, a lot of experimental work can happen there. And it is one of the first experiences you have coming into the arts complex. So it's a great introduction of that space and what downtown arts at the arts complex can look like. So this is really turning it into a modern and fully accessible space, particularly at the house. Last, I'm stuck on garages. This is where the mayor tells me to stop talking about garages all the time, but it is the first experience and the last experience that our patrons have when they come into the arts complex. So we propose this in the same vein that Dottie and Parks do for their ongoing maintenance. We need to continue to care for this. There's a series of improvements, life safety, complete overhaul of fire suppression and alarm systems, fire pumps, structural and stormwater drainage improvements, lighting, accessibility. So this really impacts everything that every user of the arts complex. And so we will keep this as a standing bond item. If there is another program, you'll never see this one go away. I did want to go on to a couple of projects that were not submitted by Arts and Venues. So these were not the 5, but they are related to our assets. So that's our Galleria revitalization. So that's the covered glass, that's the main thoroughfare of the arts complex covered by the glass top. And our team's done some charrette work with all the stakeholders at the arts complex. So this is improvements there, zhuzhing it up, and Burns Park Public Art. The arts complex came in at tier 1, and all the tiers from the subcommittees are listed in your presentation. I neglected to point that out. Burns Park came in at tier 3, and we are continuing to work through that in phases. This would just accelerate what those phases are for maintenance. Speaking of maintenance, we have a maintenance slide that you can look at. What this generally tells you is that through 2024, John Graham and team have caught up on our facility condition assessments, and we've also been partnering with Dottie on this. We will just always have more maintenance for the city-owned venues, and we will never be able to catch up with this. So being strategic about the 5 requests that you see in front of you move the needle for us and really help us get caught up, with the exception of Loretto, which is a new venue that will open at the end of 2027. So that's the only non-existing priority that we put forward. And then our last slide just talks about why this matters. We want to continue to keep our facilities accessible and well-maintained for our community. We contributed to the economic recovery and vitality of Denver, particularly downtown and Red Rocks, which feeds a lot of the cultural organizations in Denver through the grants that we offer, and that's a real need right now nationally. And then you can see the community programming that we are able to accomplish. So it starts with maintenance and starts with improvements. That was an actual 5 minutes.
That was 10 minutes and 10 seconds.
That was
Yes.
really good.
I have a
Best
comment.
I got.
A comment and maybe a clarification. Mary, you had asked if there were any projects that are being proposed for this bond that were held over or didn't get funded in prior bonds. We told you that there weren't any. Gretchen just indicated that the Loretta Heights Garage might be one. So we're going to try to deconflict information. And
Yeah, it was a named project on the companion ordinance. It was then removed for lack of funding. So it is not unfunded on the current, it is removed from the current bond program, from the RISE program.
I have a question. So what Does Betcher get any SCFT funding?
Betcher is just the hall. The symphony receives SCFD funding as a tier 2 organization.
Okay. And then you mentioned naming rights. Are there any amounts that you think could be used from grants or philanthropy that would be able to subsidize the 125 million?
Yeah, the cost of the project that's currently proposed is 157 million. So this is one where I think the theme is scalability. We will work on how and if this is able to fit into a bond package, what we can rename. The only significant naming right, the most significant one will be the naming of the hall. So that's a really important conversation we've already had with the Betcher Foundation, and they're willing to partner with us on that. The amount of that naming right is still undetermined.
Happy?
A couple of questions. You mentioned this symphony had its own request in as a separate, is it the same project, same amount, or
Yes.
is that different? Okay.
No, it is. We both submitted because we play different roles. They program the venue and we are responsible for the operations and maintenance.
So let me be back on Mary's question about matching funds. I know in the past, a number of the tier 1 culturals have come to the table with a project that has matching dollars so that the entire project cost is not borne by the bond. So how much of the overall project cost is the symphony committing to?
We are estimating in some, and this is something that you will know only when the symphony goes out to help, sort of like the National Western did. They were assigned the naming rights to facilities that the city built and owns. The symphony would embark on a naming rights campaign. The best guess I have for that right now is between 20 to 35 million dollars.
So out of
So there's a project, like every agency, we're trying to determine what is the right amount to put in. We know that for the amount you see for 125 million, we can deliver a hall. The desired hall amount scaled down from the 200 million plus was 157. I think it is 20 to 35 million dollars worth of naming rights capacity, which we will only know when we get to market, but hopefully those are ranges that help you in your deliberations.
So are those dollars then, does that actually, the dollars they're bringing actually increase the overall, or is that subtract from the 125?
It could be either. If the committee chooses to recommend this at 125, then we would pursue $157 million closer to that original project scope. If the committee can't accommodate that, then you could back out into the 20 to 35 million dollar of naming rights. I just want to be really upfront about that we don't know those numbers with certainty, but those are reasonable ranges based on some initial assessment that we've done.
And then finally, around the equity priorities, can you talk about among the projects that you've named, which ones address most directly the equity considerations?
The first three, I would say, the amount, and this would be in the symphony's proposal, we are really here speaking to the facility today, but the amount of additional programming that the symphony would be able to accomplish with this renovation, they would increase to 52 weeks per year of programming from the current 43 to 44. They have plans to launch a scholarship, other family concerts, to host intergenerational, bilingual, cultural focused events. They already do a lot of this work right now. This allows them to dig into that. With Loretto in Southwest Denver, we don't have a venue there. I think it really opens the door to a lot of community that isn't well served by our portfolio right now. And with Red Rocks, everything we do to Red Rocks feeds what we are able to do with equity accessibility in Denver. So preserving that venue is what feeds all of our for good work that we're able to do in Denver. So those are the top three.
So nothing in this bond addresses the other investments that you make in community cultural programming across the city.
It's a connected system where the revenues that we're able to derive solely from the Broadway programming at the Arts Complex, from Red Rocks, generate those funds that revolve back into that programming. Every other thing that we do is what we call a net investment, which means it costs us money.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, one last very quick question, I promise, Evan. I noticed that a number of the arts and venues, culturals were not represented in the projects presented. Are you just presenting, Gretchen, the ones that you all own?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so the 5 tier 1 organizations submit their own proposals. That's where and then other arts organizations submit, like the symphony, and we overlap with them at the arts complex, but they are completely standalone, city-owned facility, but not operated or all involved with arts committees.
Thank you.
It's a common question.
Thank you
Yep.
very much.
Thank you.
Lisa and the library are up. And then host is up.
Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa LaGuardi. I'm the interim city librarian and chief public services officer at Denver Public Library. I'm kind of bringing books. I don't have a dog. We're handing out the strategic plan, a one-pager about the projects that we're putting forward and also our engagement magazine. So as you all know, the Denver Public Library provides equitable, inclusive access to everyone. From children, young adults, families, immigrants, older adults, everyone from any community, our doors are open all the time. Our vision to be a strong community where everyone thrives. And you can see our mission and values here. Next slide. The Denver Public Library has been open since 1889, and we serve thousands of community members through our 27 locations, soon to be 29. So we have Lena, our Choletta branch, will be opening up sometime this summer in Westwood, and we're going to be doing a groundbreaking in our Globeville neighborhood. The library has served the community for years, and the libraries are the most high-traffic buildings in our communities. We are serving as heating and cooling locations throughout the year. We also see after-school programming, early learning and childhood development opportunities. We provide access to thousands of resources, and we are a place where individuals feel safe and where they can freely explore without judgment. Next slide. So these are our DPL priorities. Our priorities are, we're leveraging our strategic plan to break up these priorities. Leveraging community insights and facilities management expertise, the library has identified projects priorities for the Vibrant Denver Bond Initiative. We have a responsibility to balance our capital investments as well as our historic assets with meaningful growth and expansion to meet the residents where they are. DPL's strategy and strategic plan that you have in front of you, our core services are our collections, our technology, our spaces, and our skilled staff. We have organized our priorities into 3 themes, and we'll go to the next slide. Our first is comprehensive renovations. Listed here are some of the comprehensive renovations we have prioritized: Montbello, Bear Valley, Woodbury, Decker, Park Hill. We also have Valdez Carrion here. That was listed, that came back from the subcommittee as a tier 2 because there's conversation about adding a new location instead of redoing this location in the National Western Complex. So we want it to be a priority 1, but it's been moved to a priority 2. Next slide. Stewarding Denver's history, DPL Special Collections and Archives are keepers of our collective history. Prioritizing the preservation, maintenance, and enhancement of our archival museum and gallery spaces ensures that diverse stories from our community are accessible to all for future generations. In this tier, we have our Blair Caldwell African American Research Library. We are doing the 2nd and 3rd floors. The first part, the library itself, was done prior and just reopened a couple years ago. And Central Library, we're looking at collections in our ideal lab. So the collections, and then gallery spaces on the 5th and 7th floor were tiered as 2. Next slide. New locations. While DPL is focused on stewardship of our existing resources, we recognize unmet needs for our library services in a number of growing and underserved neighborhoods. Strategic placement of new library buildings represents an opportunity for creative service connection. There are 4 locations that have been identified that are in DPL's critical partnership locations within the community. You'll see here East Colfax, Chaffee Park, Gateway, and Northfield Branch, which was tiered as a 3. As noted, East Colfax was put forward in collaboration with Host, and I believe Host will be talking more about that project. Next slide. Here we've listed our priorities. This is a quick reference for you to see our current locations and what each project would cost, and also the council district that they are in. Slide. So we have project details for each one. We're not going to go through each slide. There's a slide deck, each location. You could just go to the next one so I could show. It has the council district. It has what year the building was built, what we need to do in that location. If we're expanding, if we're doing life safety measures, some have accessibility needs, and then the cost at the bottom, estimated cost for each one. So we have heard over and over again from our users that we are their learning hubs. They're a trusted source for information in this day and age. We know that's really important, and they're a refuge from the elements. And for many, we're a third space where they can explore and do so much more. We know that these projects will have immediate lasting impact on each of our communities and will bring joy and connection for so many. That was quick. Thank you. I have Tony here with me. He's the Director of Facilities Planning. He's been on the subcommittees and he has done some presentations for you already, but if you have any questions, we're here.
Just wanted to say I spent most of my childhood in the Bear Valley branch, so thank you. You're right that it's a learning hub. I learned a lot.
All right, if no questions, thank you very much. Adam? Armando, you're after Adam.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Adam Lyons, Deputy Director for the Department of Housing Stability, or Host. Let me go to the next slide, please. I'll do a brief introduction of the Department of Housing Stability, as well as our capital programs and assets, and talk about our priority projects. So just up first, the Department of Housing Stability builds a healthy, housing connected Denver. We invest in resources, create policy, partner with organizations to keep people in their homes that they already live in, to quickly resolve episodes of homelessness, and to connect people with affordable housing opportunities. We do this in a number of ways. First, investments in permanent affordable housing, which includes homeownership. Now, just to note here that we typically do not own, we really do not own the buildings that we invest in. We are really partner driven on the affordable housing side, where we invest through special revenue funds, the Homeless Resolution Fund, linkage fees, and the Affordable Housing Fund into private developments. We also have our shelter operations. We do own and operate a handful of shelters, but a lot of our shelters are also owned by partners to where we invest in to make them sustainable. Then finally, supportive services and outreach, particularly to people experiencing homelessness or to tenants at risk of homelessness, to home buyers in the form of home buyer counseling or down payment assistance. So quite a bit goes into that services and outreach section. Just a little bit about how Host is structured, really 4 pillars within the department. First is the Housing Stability and Homeless Resolution Division. This really does a lot of our unsheltered outreach and connections, our homeless resolution program, so rapid rehousing, voucher programs, and the like. Shelter operations, so making sure that both our congregate and non-congregate shelters are maintained and are safe and livable places for our unsheltered communities. And then stability and prevention. So keeping people away from falling into homelessness through tenant-based rental assistance, mortgage and foreclosure assistance, legal aid, and the like. There's housing opportunity. This has a lot of our public investments into affordable permanent housing. So the catalytic partnerships, they use policy tools like expanding affordable housing or inclusionary zoning policy specific to the city, where we require a certain percentage of market rate units to be affordable in those developments. Housing development, this is the group that does all the public investment into affordable housing using our special revenue funds like the Affordable Housing Fund, the Homeless Resolution Fund, and some of the other legacy sources. It also includes federal funding investments into affordable housing development. And then our asset management and compliance teams, the folks that are really tasked with keeping these properties affordable, making sure that rents and incomes are set appropriately and that they're sustainable into the long term. Operations and impact, this is really the backbone of the department. It's our finance team, our contracts procurement, and our data and information team. And then finally, our marketing and communications team does all of our public engagement, our council coordination and liaison, and all of our marketing and communications tools. So to start with the project priorities, I really bucketed these into two separate buckets. First is housing priorities, really with the aim to proactively mitigate involuntary displacement resulting from rising land costs, rents, and property tax associated with the public investments. The city intends to implement strategies through land acquisitions and leasing programs. So as the library has just mentioned, we do have two high priority projects that is a co-location of both libraries and housing. The rendering that you can see on this slide is the Globeville co-location of both housing and libraries that will break ground later this summer. About 170 units of affordable housing, really deep affordability at the 30% AMI level that goes up to 80%, and half of the development is 3 or 4 bedroom units, so very large family size developments there. So really looking at the success of this program to where the city is the landowner. We will own the land in perpetuity. We will lease it to a development firm. The libraries will purchase their portion, their condo portion of the library. The GES Coalition, through their entity Tierra Colectiva, their land trust, will own a commercial space within the building, but the city will be the long-term landowner underneath these improvements. So really building off that model and that success that we will soon break ground on, we're proposing 2 separate library housing developments. These were both reviewed by the subcommittee as well and ranked as a tier 1. The first is the East Central Library. I think we're really looking at the East Colfax neighborhood for this development, as well as the West Side Library. And I know libraries, New Chaffee Park Library, so really looking to build on that gap in service, as well as what we've heard from the community for the north side, or the really northwest side in that case, for another one of these developments. And then more site acquisition and readiness. So this is going out, working with our partners in the Division of Real Estate to acquire new land to do kind of this similar model where the city is the landowner. We will own the land in perpetuity and then lease it to a developer to build the improvements. So all in total, $70 million is being requested in the bond program for affordable housing development, as well as preservation and the co-locations of the libraries. The second bucket here is the shelters. So really the biggest thing here is the shelter and supportive housing, accessible and safety projects. So this includes things like entrance ramps, door openers, access controls like key fobs and secure entry, elevators, accessible parking, lighting, curb, and exterior accessibility and safety improvements. So these would be both a mixed bag of city-owned facilities and private developments that offer either shelter or supportive housing, and also is a mix of that deferred maintenance versus life cycles that Jackson talked about at the start of the meeting. So about $11.4 million going to the accessible and safety improvements at the shelters or supportive housing developments. We have identified 33 projects over 7 council districts. That should be in your all's packet as well. And then lastly, sprung shelters. So these are highly durable, rapidly constructed facilities that are used a lot of times in hospitals or airports. Schools will use them as well. They're weather resistant. They can really be put up very quickly and provide a great opportunity to really maximize our shelter capacities by bringing online an additional up to 400 shelter beds. So this $18 million would be both the structure itself and the land underneath the structure. So I think that I'm trying to be quick, knowing we're short on time, so I'm happy to open it up to any questions.
So DPL's looking at some new libraries. And with your request, is there some combination there that aligns with the housing?
Absolutely, yeah. So on the East Central one specifically, we did coordinate together to submit the bond proposal for that one. Looking at a few sites within that East Colfax neighborhood that are either under an affordable housing redevelopment plan or other mechanisms, where we would coordinate together, very similar to the Globeville project that we really worked together, which was also bond funded, to do something similar, probably smaller scale than the 170 units that we're getting in Globeville, really just depending on the size of the acquisition there.
So their request for the East Colfax library, I think they have one request for that. Does that include housing?
It does, yes. It's a joint combination project, yes.
Okay.
Go ahead. So to piggyback on that last one, so how do the dollars that you mentioned in yours, are those duplicated numbers or are those in addition to the numbers that we saw in the library proposals?
Same numbers in the library proposals. So we'd be looking at, using the bond resources to either go after the land acquisition, the actual construction of the library. The housing portion, similar to Globe Bill, would be financed through other affordable housing mechanisms like low-income housing tax credits, Proposition 123, or the city gap financing through our special.
Okay, that was my next question, which is matching funds. How does this stack up to other resources that you have? So you'd be putting some of those other resources into the overall to the housing side of the project. But the 50 million for acquisition is the same dollar amount or is duplicated in the library proposal?
It's the same. It's a joint host library project.
So is the 50 on top of what was in their proposal, library proposal, or is it the same number?
No, those would be separate kind of projects altogether. The library co-housing model would be separate from the land acquisition. So that would be going out and acquiring land and then, really RFPing it out to a development partner to build on, but we would still own the underlying land and really get to dictate what gets built, where and for who. And how quickly rents can grow and things like that. We would have land covenants on the property that could really dictate what could be built there in the future. And it could also include, ground floor commercial or, public spaces like a small rec center or even a library. So it could be other public uses included. And that's just really for the site acquisition, really to mitigate the displacement that goes along with a lot of public and private investments.
Okay, so that's just site acquisition in general, it doesn't relate to those other two projects.
Correct.
And the Chafee Library is the west side that you're referring to?
Yes.
Correct.
To here, okay. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Sorry to have confused that.
So just a couple things. Number one is a point of just clarification. It would be really helpful to kind of take the host and housing projects out and put them in their own little bucket in the build your own bond tool thing, just because it's hard to find.
Yeah.
Some of those, so just a thought. And then number two, I thank you for your presentation, Executive Director. I think one of my questions is your department has been funded probably dramatically more than any department in the last couple of years. And not only in general fund and capital improvement funds, but also just overall arching projects. How does this pencil with asking for more dollars in the bond and the operational implications of that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the dollars that Host has available today to invest, especially in permanent affordable housing, is really on a gap financing basis. So of a total development cost, we are kind of 8 to 10% of that capital stack, and that's really about it. And we know that one of the largest drivers of this cost is available land. So I think the land portion of that, if we're able to go in and secure land today, partner with a developer to build on top of it, that could take out, 20% of the project cost just in the land alone. So when you layer on additional host gap financing, we're seeing much more impactful dollars being driven into these projects than just what the gap financing alone can really handle.
And then the last comment, I think I saw somewhere, I think in review of the documents, that you had stuff in there for deferred maintenance. You all don't, and this may have changed, by the way, so I might be talking out of ignorance, but you all don't manage the deferred maintenance of those projects usually, or those buildings usually, right? It's usually general services.
It is correct, general
Right.
services.
So is that a redundant ask from what general services also is asking for or gonna look at, or what does that look like in terms of the prioritization of which?
So a lot of what we have in the shelter and supportive housing maintenance and safety issues are not just city owned. So there's a few city owned facilities that are included in that. A lot of it is other like legal requirements, like accessibility, ADA requirements at some other shelters and supportive housing developments that the city doesn't own. So general services wouldn't be included in part of that budget request. So that would be separate. But the ones that are under city control, like some of the hotel motel purchases that we made for non-congregate shelter, Those are also included in this ask, but may also be represented in general services.
So at the end of the day, how many people will be housed?
Well, the mayoral goal is, 2,000 from unsheltered homelessness into housing or into shelter, and then another 2,000 from shelter or homelessness into permanent housing. So, we would look at least maintaining those current capabilities. The sprung shelter alone can support up to 400 new congregate beds. But these shelters vary really anywhere from 50 to 300 people per night in these shelters. So the only new shelter that we're looking at here is that sprung shelter. So that would be an additional 400 beds, but it would really be keeping the shelters that we do have in operation sustainable more in the long term.
So this isn't permanent housing?
Not the shelter bucket, I guess. It should all be, yes, non-permanent housing.
So if the big issue is how do we establish permanent housing for people who need housing in the city because they can't afford housing today? Does this address this in any way?
The first bucket, the housing bucket would, through the strategic land acquisitions, through the low library housing co-location model. I think we can get, roughly 1,500, 2,000 units just off of what we have, there alone.
Those are permanent.
Permanent housing, yes, sir.
And that's getting confused between East Central and, are those what you're talking about, those 20 million?
Yes, that's both library projects will be permanent housing included.
Right.
And then the site acquisitions, we would look at acquiring properties and lease those to a development partner to build the improvements. And I think on just about any site that we would acquire, we would look at least 100 units of new housing. So if you take, the $50 million request there, that could get us anywhere from 10 to 15, maybe 20 sites. So that's really anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 units that we expect from built on top of city.
Adam, thank you very much. Armando, and then Al.
Hey, Evan, before we move on, because I have forgotten, for the library, we let you off too easy without any question. And I did have the one question and you could come back. It's the same question for each of them, where there are matching, so the library has now its own capacity to raise funds. And so I'd like to understand how those funds figure into the overall plan for your priorities.
Yes.
I don't need to have it today, but just,
Okay.
and just a fair warning for all of the agencies, I think that's a question that we all have.
Noted on our slides, there is also, we are excluding, it says HVAC, we're paying for that with DPL funds. So we can follow up and all of that for each project.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'll say good morning, everyone. Thank you to the committee for the opportunity to present my priorities to you all for the GO bond. I'm here to represent, I'm Armando Solarte III, the Executive Director of Public Safety here in Denver. I'm here representing those departments that report up to me, Denver Police Department, Denver Fire Department, and the Denver Sheriff's Department, particularly around, because our 911 center is funded through special revenue funds through our PUC fees. So really looking to talk about those priorities today. I included in the packet, I'm going to breeze through them and I'll let you read them, the individual mission and vision of our departments, our public safety departments, our first responders. I'll pass right through there, and if we can get into slide 7. But what you'll find when you read those missions and values of our departments is, a steadfast approach to providing public safety to our community engagement, having trust within that community, and prevention. Prevention is something that we work really hard and diligently on in every aspect, whether it's fire prevention, whether it's prevention in crime, and whether it's prevention in someone that comes into our jail for re-entry or coming back into our jails. That is very, takes a lot of work, and it's something that our teams prioritize. When we started talking about what would be our priority, when I met with all of our public safety leaders, every one of them, the number one priority, including mine, is a joint public safety combined training facility, an academy. If any of you have had the opportunity to visit any of our police academy, our sheriff's academy, or our fire academy, you will see it doesn't take long to look around that these are aging facilities, they're antiquated, and they don't really meet the needs of training today. In fact, we're really limited in size. That's just one of the factors in us trying to recruit. One of the things that has been something that we've worked on since I took this role coming out of the pandemic, we had lost a lot of folks in our public safety services due to the pandemic, after the murder of George Floyd, and we were working very hard. One of the limiting factors as we were trying to plan out, trying to recruit, is the number of folks that we can get into our academies, the number of folks that we can get into academies at the same time. Let's say the police academy and the sheriff's academy, because they also pull on the same resources and same kinds of things. It becomes very limited. The other thing that we're not able to really take full advantage of is today's technology. Technology, as you all are aware, is growing leaps and bounds. In everything I see from the time I first started in policing over 30 years ago to today, technology, it gives us the ability to train our folks much better and to also take advantage of certain methods and methodologies to make training more digestible for our folks. When I talk to community members and I'm out in the community often talking to them, I hear very clearly that they want increased public safety. They want to feel safer in their neighborhoods. They want accountability for folks that are violating our laws. When I talk to the sheriff, our police chief, and our fire chief, they've heard the same thing. One of the things when I said, how could this GO bond address that? They all came back to our training facility. The reason that we're talking about a joint training facility is one, it's a much newer phenomenon in public safety training. Across the country, there are some models around joint public safety training facilities. What that does is it creates joint space, so we get to save in costs for things like training rooms, locker rooms. And I want to point, when I talk about locker rooms, one of the big things that has become also apparent as a real critical need, particularly for our police and our fire department, is the space for females. As we've recruited and done a good job recruiting more folks that look like the city we serve, we've really been very intentional around recruiting more females. However, our facilities don't accommodate that. They aren't accommodating for female locker rooms and for the equity of space for folks to come into our training facilities. I think this limits us also as well when we're trying to recruit talent. When we're trying to recruit the best and the brightest in our metro and even across the country, one of the things that becomes a recruiting tool is where they're going to train. Much like if you think of Coach Prime and CU, one of the things he talked about in bringing people here was improving the facilities. It brings folks, they want to come here. One of the things that's been actually frankly embarrassing is that in Denver, we have, the biggest and some of the best public safety departments in the state. However, our facilities are lacking incredibly. In fact, for some of our training, we have to go outside of our facilities that we're not limited. I'll give you the example of our Denver Fire Academy. On this picture of the slide, you'll see is our aging burn building, and just below that is a makeshift building that we've had to fabricate with storage containers, with steel storage containers, so that we could do the very vital and needed training of live burns. In our old building, we're no longer able to do so because the structure is so deteriorated, it's not structurally sound. So we've had to do this to not only keep our accreditation for our fire department, but more importantly, to keep our firefighters safe. They need to be trained in live burns when they go and they're responding to the real fires out there in our community. The other thing our academies lack is that ADA accessibility. In all of our spaces, in all of our police buildings, our fire district stations, our sheriff buildings, our jails, one of the things that make it, that really helps drive that trust with our community is accessibility. In some of these spaces, they're so old, we do not have ADA accessibility. We don't meet current requirements. And that has been a real problem. And we hope that this would help in that. The training, the quality of training that we can deliver in new facilities. I'll give you an example, simulator environment, simulated training, live kind of where you're wearing virtual headsets, where you're going through real life things is some of the best training that you can have. Right now, we have that training set up in a makeshift building in our crime lab, in a makeshift space in our crime lab because we do not have adequate space for this. You can only imagine if we could build those spaces that would be in a public safety training academy. The other things that we try to build and try to train in, and I've trained in things and have had the ability to train in environments like this, are mock villages or mock buildings, storefronts and things like that, that give our folks the ability to practice and train almost like the real thing. So they're better prepared when they encounter our community and they encounter real life scenarios out in the community. The other thing that's exciting about a combined training facility, and I think excites some of our community, is the fact that we could also have a community space and wellness facilities for our officers and for our firefighters, our sheriff's deputies, for our first responders. As we've seen, and when I took over in this department coming out of the pandemic, our public safety staffs have really been through a lot in coming back and serving in today's world. Wellness is not only their physical wellness, but their mental health wellness is paramount for them to delivering good community safety to our city and county of Denver. One of the things that we're limited in those spaces is in facility spacing for that. We have physical therapists that are in each of our departments. Many of these folks are set up in makeshift offices, makeshift buildings. And if we could have a state-of-the-art facility, we've already found that this saves money by getting folks that are injured in our line of duty, getting back to work, and preventative for injuries as well. So that is really where we've talked about it. And in the classrooms, I think you all have maybe seen the technology spaces in classrooms, how that can lend to a better learning environment, whether you're talking about smart boards or things like that. I believe that will be helpful as we prepare and hopefully get a training facility. So again, that's our number one priority. It's something that we all came in unison. I'm going to highlight a few others, just a few other projects as well. And I want to note that the subcommittee, I thought, did a really excellent job in raising up the priorities of those. So I'm going to highlight a few that align with my priorities and those of our safety leadership. Next slide. Crime prevention through environmental design. This is frequently referred to as SEPTED. It's a concept that has been around policing and public safety for some time now. It's something that the Denver Police Department has a number of experts in that have gone through certifications to be able to go out and view a building, a space, a business, a home, and give an assessment to the homeowner, the business owner, community member, even in public spaces. What are environmental things, design things that we can do that would help that space be safer? It's not always just barbed wire or things like that, but lighting. Lighting is frequently talked about because we know how effective it can be. Lighting a space, as you've heard from other presentations around the priority around lighting parks. Those are some of our spaces where we also have hotspots of crime activity in some of those not well-lit parks. What we've found is folks do not like to congregate when it's well-lit and well-things, particularly those folks that are maybe have bad intentions, but they do, and they are attracted to spaces where they can congregate, where it's dark, where their actions can be hidden by light, and maybe not captured by video surveillance or other things they're seen by patrolling folks. We really utilize this crime prevention through environmental design, and what's all after the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, utilizing ARPA dollars. What we found was, is we had those experts in our police districts that would go out to businesses and places and make a number of references to how they can improve the safety of their place. But what did they need? What did that business owner or the homeowner or the business, what did they need? They needed funding to put those things in. A lot of times it was a fence, or it might have been more lighting, or it might have been clearing landscape or making certain things that make it more amenable to see. But what often happened was the folks were saying, you know what, we're struggling. We don't have the money to do that. We were able to exercise and utilize ARPA dollars to help invest in that, particularly on East Colfax. We made a considerable investment around those spaces, and we found real that it really helped. It really worked. But we also found through that process that the city and county of Denver has a very aging infrastructure. And for things that we thought were going to be very easy around installing lights, installing things, we had limits on our Excel infrastructure and other things that drove up the cost dramatically in trying to make those types of investments and try to get things going. The other thing that we're finding is one of the things that we utilize often as the police department and in responding to crimes. One of the things we try to leverage is real-time video surveillance. I think we've all seen the news when a crime is captured on video surveillance. It not only makes it easier for us to apprehend the individuals involved, but also to prosecute those so they can be held accountable. One of the things about our aging infrastructure in Denver is our halo cameras. Our halo cameras these are the surveillance cameras around our downtown and around high frequency corridors, are very aged. They don't allow us to utilize some of the newest technologies as we engage in APIs that lay over these things, or think about the person that maybe came into our downtown to commit a crime, took light rail or took a bus. Well, there's video surveillance and our ability to track them and their movements throughout that. We have software APIs that can help us with that, but due to the age of our cameras, some of those we're not able to fully employ that. And also when we're doing these assessments, these subcommittee assessments, sometimes it's the placement of cameras. It is the placement of these things. If you all recall, there was a very tragic incident out in East Colfax, in the neighborhood right off by a park, where a mother was killed by a stray round from a conflict that was happening at a park, and she was killed. One of the things that we were able to do was install cameras and lighting there, and it really helped bringing the crime down in that neighborhood. And that's just one example of how that is. We employ in Denver, it's a best practice called place network investigations. You may hear frequently PNI. Is that a PNI location? What that is a way that DPD looks at a location, looks at variables around violent crime, looks at how it's congregated in sectors of our city. What we then employ a technique around place network investigations, which means we don't just send out police officers to go arrest everybody and do all those things. We actually take a multifaceted approach where we bring all of the city. We bring people in like Dottie. We bring people in like public health and environment to bring all their tools to bear to help that neighborhood and really try to decrease crime. Well, what we find when we have these, and we have a handful of these locations throughout the city, and we've been very successful where we have employed this. But one of our barriers is when there's SEPTEDs or when there's investment that needs to be made by Dottie to maybe make the street safer or do some things like that, we don't have budget for that. And so we think that through the investment here with the SEPTED, that will help us, particularly in areas focused on those city parks in our particularly PNI locations. Next slide.
Armando, I just want to flag for you, we're
Okay.
15 minutes.
So we're down to the last four that I'll go through very quickly, all relate to aging buildings or buildings that aren't meeting our space that are critical to our public safety needs. One is Denver Fire District 19. It's one of our oldest fire districts. It's in the Hilltop neighborhood. This is something that came in from community and also from council and the safety subcommittee. This needs renovations and repairs to extend this life of this building, down to the HVAC, to the garage door openers, to things like that. This has been very critical. It serves a vital critical core in our city. The other thing is our police administration building. If anyone has visited police headquarters, you all know how it is needed of a lot of structural improvements. It's an older building built in 1977 from our plaza concrete that's falling apart, but to the more critical structural deficits that the building has in our parking below the structure that needs to be improved to ensure safety of the structure. And currently, right now, the 5th floor of the structure sits empty. That has the potential to house our real-time crime center, which is what I was talking about earlier in utilizing technology those are technicians and analysts that sit through 24 hours a day behind monitoring our Halo footage and things like that to help our first responders. Next slide. A very important joint project is the Denver Children's Advocacy Center. DCAC is how it's normally referred to. This is a partnership between DPD, DHS, DCAC, and many others. This is such a critical space where multidisciplinary people come together to help our abused children, our most vulnerable children, and our vulnerable families. It provides services, but more importantly, it also helps the Denver Police Department in our investigation of child abuse cases and cases where children are experiencing significant trauma. Instead of bringing that child to a police station to have an interview at a police building, you can only imagine how that would increase the trauma. The interviews are done by forensic interviewers in spaces that are designed to minimize the trauma with very intentional places around that. Yet, what makes this work so well is the co-location of law enforcement and human services and our medical staff that work with these, our forensic interviews, that work in coordination for these things. This would be a new building that would increase the space that it is right now with that co-location and bringing everyone in that same space. It's very tight. And to get a new building, this is something that we're working DCAC and it's something that the Public Safety Department, especially our DPD, really supports. And lastly is Denver Police District 4, built in 1986 and has not had this is in Southwest Denver, had no significant renovation. It really had limited access if you've had an opportunity to go there for our community, which is very important when we're talking about our district stations. Community rooms, community space is critical for those districts to be integrated into their communities. It's already outgrown the current building, and back in 2002, there was an adjacent parcel was purchased for the expansion. This is something that I know is also a priority of council and came out from the subcommittee. So I know I went through that fast. There's a lot going on. I offer my time, or if you ever need to ask any questions or follow-up questions, I'll make sure to get that. But we have time for any.
Yeah, questions.
Manager, what are the costs for these? There are no.
Yeah.
For each one, you can get those to us.
Yeah, we'll get those checked. Yeah.
My second question is, I'm all supportive of the new training facility because I can appreciate how it can be used to attract more people, because I think we're having difficulty recruiting to police officers. But we tell people we're going to spend 125 million, is it?
Yes.
For that. How do we document the fact that when people go through a better training facility like that, those police officers, firefighters, or sheriffs come out actually better trained, so that there'll be reduced conflict between citizens and law enforcement? If you could point to examples around the country that have seen that kind of improvement in the actual conduct of officers, training facilities, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely, sir. I've done a lot of research on that, so I'm happy to provide that to you. The other thing about that price tag, knowing that this price tag and hearing all the presentations for all the needs that are trying to be addressed with this bond, we have talked to philanthropists, and philanthropy in our community have engaged and are willing to do some some funding of this project. That's something that is still being worked on. But when we talk about spaces like community space or things like that, I do know we have philanthropists that are very interested in supporting this through their dollars as well.
Well, that would be helpful to know.
Yes.
If you came to us and said, I've got $100 million committed, whatever it is, if you do this, that would be helpful.
We're working on that.
Yeah, great.
So maybe piggyback on that a little bit in terms of scalability. Because I mean, one of the issues is we still don't have a location. And if I was trying to understand the scalability scenarios that was presented last time, it was a little confusing. So if the full 175 million was not in this bond, but we were committed to proceeding. I'd like to understand better the phases, shall we say, of the scaling. And what I was confused about last time is there was something about a new facility in a new place. And if not, then we would invest some amount in an existing facility for the time being. And then I wasn't clear about how it played out to the end goal. So could somebody help me understand that scenario?
I just want to interject, that we still have 2 executive directors that we want to have a conversation with.
And I can get an answer later.
I think, I'm going to send an email out to you later
Yeah.
today. I think there are a handful of projects that there's a lot of questions still about. This would certainly be one, and we could ask Armando to come back and have a deeper conversation when we don't have other executive directors with busy schedules.
And thank you for that. We're working on that.
Thank you. Sorry. All right, Al.
Really quickly, good morning. Al Gardner, Executive Director for General Services. So what we've done, and I'm just gonna hop right into this. We have 3 sections of General Services. General Services, there's a charter office, so administration, next slide, which is on-call services, thank you. Security, energy, central services, and then purchasing was responsible for purchasing and buying goods for most of the city, everything I like to say from toilet tissue to jet fuel, right? Oversight of cooperative purchasing agreements, workday strategy, and then the facilities management side, which is the maintenance of 140 different buildings, leased buildings, utility team, and now we oversee right at a little over 6 million square feet. So that square footage growth right at about 1.2 million has happened over the past 2 years. So we've acquired over an additional 1 million square feet over the past couple of years. Next slide, please. So what we've done too, when we take a look at what this ask is distill it down from what's important and what's urgent. So although there are a lot of asks that we can come to this group for, we've distilled it down to the urgent. So what you're going to see is the urgent, and most of which is bordering on either we maintain it, ask for this, or we have some level of failure in. Next slide, please. Highest priority deferred capital needs prioritization. And these are the 4 reasons or the thought behind the ask, which is accessibility, life safety, urgency, and equity. I won't read all of these slides. Obviously, from the accessibility point, we're significantly behind in terms of maintaining access for public safety, public facing facilities. We talk about those 140 facilities. We're talking about Department of Motor Vehicles. We talk fire. We talk police. We're talking a number of the buildings that are external and internal to the city. General Services has the unique ability. We service both external and internal partners. So we're servicing the city as well as city employees. Life safety pieces, highest priorities for facility management. We talk about elevators, fire suppression, fire panels, and all of those sorts of things that enable public safety to understand and know when there's an emergency in the buildings. Priority needs that addressing failing systems that impact health and safety. Next slide, please. perhaps this is one of the most important in discussions with my counterparts around the country, actually, in preparing for this, trying to understand where that mix looks at in other cities, specifically Baltimore, DC, and Seattle. And I just met with my counterpart in Houston when I was supposed to be on vacation. And it was to talk about where their mix, what type of mix that they had in terms of their facilities management audit that they had particularly gone through. We sit at around 76% of our facilities in poor condition. That's a result of the Jacobs-Dottie study. So we're sitting well below the national average. We're probably around 30 to 40% lower in this percentage point than our average city. GS expenditure, the reason why we've gotten to this, because we're at 28 cents per square foot, which falls significantly short of the downtown Denver average of approximately $7 per square foot. If we look at municipalities equal to ours around the United States, they sit somewhere between $5 and $6 per square foot. So even on that, we're still significantly lower than that. 10% are in poor condition. And when you see the difference between 76 and 10, you're looking at we were taking each other's temperature, you have 1 degree in between a low grade temperature and a high fever. And so the 76% is probably 98.9 temperature there, and 1% would put us right in this 10%, and it would be much larger. 14% sitting in good condition. Next slide, please. Here it is. What we've done is break this down into highest priority deferred capital needs. The elevators, we talked about in a number of different facilities, 20 million to address refurbishment of high priority elevator systems for primarily public facing buildings. So right now, even in this building, we have 8 elevator banks. At any given time, between 3 to 5 of them are out, unusable, which is far below there again the national average when we average out to cities our size. And it's also becomes a safety hazard at that point, because every time we have entrapments, we call the fire department, they come out, we remove resources from being able to do other things. Emergency power, 2 to 3 million needed for critical city functions, operations. Emergency power generators at 10 different buildings. Keeping in mind, general services is responsible for ensuring that those power generators at our police stations, our firehouses, DMVs, you name it, that's what we are required to oversee. What we typically do in any given year is perform those emergency functions to test those systems 2 or 3 times this past couple years. We've almost been at a critical point where we could not start those systems. And I have Tom Fistermeyer here too, who's my director of facilities management. So yeah, he's the expert. So it's a job to hit me with something if I miss it. I'm sorry about that, Tom. Our boiler replacement is another huge one. This is a $2 million boiler replacements related critical updates at 7 city facilities. And they are on the edge of catastrophic failure. Say catastrophic failure, some of these are at the age where we cannot source parts for them. Keep in mind, a city of our size is able to source parts from many different parts of the United States, indeed around the world, and it's getting more and more difficult to try and retrofit these antiquated boiler systems we have. Next slide, please. The air handlers and chillers, the UPS power backup, 2 million for 12 facilities. These are uninterruptible power sources. I'll talk about this for a second because this is a very important one. 911 is largely impacted when our UPS systems are not working. This year we serviced our UPS systems twice to try and make sure that 911 does not fail. So last couple of years, we've been very close to fully shutting down and having some catastrophic issues with our 911 because of the UPS power failures. And 3 million, this is another important one to address critical fire panel monitoring. The suppression systems are obsolete. And just like I mentioned before, when it becomes difficult to source these pieces of equipment from around the United States and the makes and models and to retrofit, we're essentially keeping those old warbirds in the air with source parts. And those parts are becoming fewer and fewer. And no longer code compliant is another one. And although we're part of the city, we are still in line to make sure that we're in compliance with fire code and fire safety, and many times we're right up against the edge. And we're outright failing 5 major city buildings. So here we are, next slide, please, with deferred capital needs. 34 million requested for GS managed buildings with 6 focus areas. And there again, these are urgent focus areas, not important ones. The elevators, emergency power, boilers. I won't read all of these different things. Make sure I'll send you these. And this basically breaks out what I've been talking to you about. Next slide, please. The next ask is the chillers, the UPS, and the life safety portions. So that's 6 different portions that equal the $34 million request for GS managed buildings with those focus areas. Questions? And I'm the only one that did it in 5 minutes.
Star for you for that. And thank you. This is a very helpful summary. How much of these, because they involve all of these various agencies, facilities, how much are these requests, do these requests overlap, if any, with some of the other requests, libraries, other facilities?
Yeah, great question. With the library, there won't be much overlap because the library handles their budget pieces and they have a separate facilities management team. When it comes to police and safety, there'll be some overlap there in terms of the ask for that. With hosts, that as was mentioned, anything that deals with their city shelters, there may be some there. But for the most part, it's mostly these larger buildings.
In addition?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
Great, thank you.
Other questions?
Is there any of this, real quick, this might be a question for you, we've allocated 20% for reinvestment allocation instead of deferred maintenance. Is any of this included in that 20%?
So none of those projects went through the subcommittee process. So the intent would be for this to go through the reinvestment process, through the 20%.
It would be.
Yes.
100%. It should. Would be. Okay.
That's it. Yeah, 100% of our funding is general fund. There's no grants, no. Yeah.
Is it possible to get a list of the projects that are on bonds that you said that they're overlap? So that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Thank you for voting yes on this. I appreciate it. I'm sure that's what the silence is. Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna be as efficient as I can be. Thanks, everybody. I think there's a huge opportunity with this bond to think about how we integrate climate and sustainability and resilience within the bond package. So the Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency, really our vision and our goal, you can go to the next slide, is really focused on how we're building a carbon pollution-free, sustainable, and resilient city for all. So equity is a big piece of what we're also focused on. Next slide, please. Go ahead, you can go forward. Go ahead. So we have a number of different capital program areas that we focus on in partnership with city agencies all across the city that you've heard from today. So we have solar and energy storage, public and EV fleet charging, renewable district thermal energy, and then energy efficiency and electrification. I really want to emphasize for the kind of discussion of the executive committee, really thinking about the reinvestment opportunity in our existing facilities, with energy efficiency and electrification being the most critical things that we could be doing right now. So when you look at all of these projects coming together, whatever ultimately is elevated to the top
we really should be thinking about how to make those projects as sustainable and resilient and climate friendly as possible. And a big component of that will be reinvesting or investing in energy efficiency and electrification. We just handed out a list to you. We can provide any follow-up afterwards on this and more detailed information and files, but we've also audited, we've done energy audits on all of our city facilities to really look at specifically how our city facilities are using energy, the state of our HVAC equipment and other energy systems, and what kinds of energy efficiency investments we need to make to improve the operations of those facilities. We know that a lot of our equipment is at end of life, is at risk of failure. A lot of these facilities are also facilities that we used for emergency situations when we have really, really cold weather days and we declare, a cold weather emergency. They're used as warming centers or cooling centers. So the risk of failure in our libraries and our rec centers and other facilities like that is high in a number of these facilities because of the status of that HVAC equipment. So really making sure that we're thinking about reinvesting in those existing facilities. And then for anything new that we're building in the bond, really want to think about those new projects incorporating sustainability into the project. A great example is the Westwood Recreation Center, which broke ground not very long ago. Originally was not designed to be an all-electric building. However, our team brought funding from the Climate Protection Fund to the table in partnership with Parks, and we actually made that an all-electric ground source heat pump system for that building. And so now we're using heat from the ground. It's going to have much lower operational and maintenance needs long-term, and this is actually part of Parks' strategy to not only be one of the most sustainable park systems in the country, but also to lower the operating costs, to lower the maintenance needs of those facilities long-term. So go ahead to the next slide, please. So we have really two kind of key projects that we want to talk about. The first is Resilient City Building. So the paper that was handed out to you that has this list of projects, we've put these in tiers based on a number of things. One is the energy audits that we completed. And other factors include equity, things like heat vulnerability in those areas where those facilities are located, as well as air quality vulnerability in those same areas. This includes energy efficiency, electrification, and optimization of those facilities. It's a $208 million package across the top three bundles here. So the $208 million is not bundle 4 and 5, just the top three bundles. And this will result in about 1.29 million in annual energy savings. And you can see again on this paper I handed out on the right-hand side, there's a column that says annual energy and operational savings, and you can see that for each one of those facilities. The other project that we are elevating is ambient loop infrastructure, and that's really also tied into this approach of making our city facilities more resilient. We have an aging steam loop system downtown that's reaching end of life. We have a number of our own buildings that are on this system. And it is an ability for us to sort of think about what the next generation of infrastructure is. So this is really a scalable project. We have, I think, 14 buildings identified in a pilot phase, but we could just do a couple of those buildings to start using proven technology, using a water source heat pump to pull heat and put heat back into the chilled water system downtown. Next slide, please. And also be able to reduce our utility costs 10 to 15%. So again, this is the Resilient City Building Package is the first one that we're talking about here. You have the list in front of you of those buildings that we've done all the energy audits on. You can see the benefits in terms of the energy savings. You can see how we've looked at equity as it relates to heat and air quality in those communities. We're optimizing our systems. We're really looking at how we're making sure those facilities are available to the community and not having to close, like some of our facilities actually have to close several weeks out of the year because the HVAC is down. And we don't want that to happen. And it usually happens during those worst periods when it's hottest or coldest because it's working the hardest during those points of time. And then also, insulating ourselves from gas spikes in the future. We saw a couple years back a really, really bad winter storm that spiked gas prices across the entire country. So we can insulate ourselves from those costs through efficiency and electrification. Next slide. So getting a little bit more into the ambient loop project. This is kind of a design of where this pilot area is, really thinking about a couple of our city facilities being elevated to do this work here. The idea would be that we would convert a couple of our buildings as sort of a pilot test case, really looking at using those water source heat pumps, tested technology, and we would use some of the existing piping and infrastructure that's already there. The other benefit of this is that it significantly lowers the electric demand. So you heard from others about electric capacity issues in the city, things like that. And in a place like downtown where the land is really valuable, avoiding the need to build new substations is really critical. So this is a way for us to decarbonize our buildings, make them more energy efficient, and also avoid significant additional infrastructure investments in terms of upgrades that might be needed for the grid. And the project is completely scalable and feasible. And I think that's it for me. I think the last one was just questions, right? So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, I'll go first since you said happy. So, well, one thing that would be helpful, and you don't need to answer it now. Thank you for the bundles and the sort of tiering that you've done here. Can you remind us or sort of fold in what the subcommittees tiering was as it compares to this thing?
So the Parks and Art Climate Committee didn't actually have a lot of these projects. It was actually in the Facilities Committee. So we presented this similar list to the Facilities Committee. And Laura, I'm looking at you. I think they considered it, looked at it.
They did.
Can you remind me what the outcome from that was?
Tier 1 for electrified city buildings.
Tier 1 for electrified city buildings. And that was just a general electrify. And I would say if we're going to electrify anything, we really, really have to do the efficiency first. Because we don't want to electrify without that efficiency. We're going to be running utility costs higher than it would be needed if we don't do that. So
that's the full 208 or it's a portion?
That was a scalable, the subcommittee had scaled scalable options.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and I think the one that came in through the public for the subcommittee, I'm not sure where the 10 million number came from, but there was a 10 million electrify city buildings project that came in from the public that the subcommittee also put in tier 1. In the Parks and Our Climate, we, I think, really just talked about the importance of whatever projects end up in the bond. Ultimately, we have to be thinking about how we're building sustainability and climate and resilience into the scope of that project.
So those are overlapping costs.
Yes, yeah, it's about how you implement.
Yeah.
It's about building the sustainability in as a cultural value.
Right. Yeah, like the example that you mentioned. Yeah.
For example, like a lot of the library improvements to their buildings and stuff would also take into account the sustainability and building it in.
Right. Makes sense. Thank you. So the downtown, the ambient loop is the city's downtown buildings, or that's where you're starting. But am I understanding that this eventually could serve other buildings in the downtown area, or?
That's correct, and I might turn it over to Drew for a second, but we have a steam system downtown that serves over 100 customers. It is reaching end of life. Utility costs for that system have gone up over 40% in the last 5+ years. So it's very expensive. It's in a little bit of a death spiral because people want to leave because it's expensive, but there's not a great alternative that's carbon free. If you leave, you pretty much either do gas or you electrify, but if everybody electrified their individual building, that would drive up the need for new substations downtown. And so what we're trying to think about is an alternative that's really focused on the lowest cost, most efficient, most resilient, reliable energy source, and that's district energy. Downtowns all across the country are doing district energy. Universities do them. It's a really important strategy. And so we can do a little proof of concept with a couple of our buildings to start. It's not necessary to have the whole system for that to function because we have the infrastructure in place through the chilled water system to use water source heat pumps to move heat where we want it, to either heat the building or to cool the building, depending on what we need during the season. So Drew, anything you would add to that in terms of the ambient loop project?
Yeah, this is one of those like hyper scalable projects. As like each individual load comes on, you can add a matching thermal resource to it. Like we said, reusing as much existing infrastructure, and that includes like terminal units in buildings. a lot of the concept is we don't have to change the core HVAC concept in that facility. And so it's much more of a plug and play type solution, but every load can get its own thermal resource. Things like Gretchen at the Arts facility adding a gigantic geothermal field near us is a type of thing that can be integrated into a system like this later on to serve many more facilities downtown.
So I was looking at your sheet with the annual energy operations savings. And then two over is the annual energy by bundle. So there are some in that category that are in parentheses, which I read to mean a loss. Is that an accurate way to read these numbers?
Yeah, do you want to speak to that, Kimber?
Yes, that means we're adding some comfort to that building that wasn't there before. Either that building had inadequate heating or cooling, or it did not have cooling before.
Okay, so the Rudy Park, for example, is a net loss of 40, but that's because
We're adding.
you would die in the building today, and after this you won't.
Right.
Okay.
Right, exactly.
And so, but that's netted out in the net, in the last column. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Liz? Thank you, Liz. Clearly, we are over time. We have a couple more agenda items. If you all are good to stay, we are happy, I think, to keep going for another 20 minutes. I think we can try to get out of here by 11.
I have an 11, so I have to be out here in 10 till.
We will be expeditious. I think we want to talk a little bit about the culturals. Gretchen mentioned them, but she didn't present on them. Patrick's going to chat for a little bit about that, and then we can talk about any next steps. And then we just want to talk about schedule for it.
I have one granola bar.
Is it for the culturals or? Is it
No, it's free. It's free. I just thought someone might.
Patrick?
Awesome. Well, thank you all for giving me a couple of minutes. I'll try to make it quick. So I facilitated the cultural subcommittee through the process, and our subcommittee functioned slightly different than most of the other subcommittees. So I know that you all received an email that some stuff had been potentially said slightly incorrectly about financial impacts and something about a questionnaire that might have come across and not made a lot of sense. So I wanted to provide some clarity on that. I also wanted to provide some clarity on why there were projects that were not presented on by the culturals directly. So the culturals as entities are in city facilities, but they operate independently. So they have leases, I believe, Gretchen?
Yeah.
Had not, yep. They have leases for those facilities, but the city owns those facilities. So that's the zoo, that's Botanic Gardens, that's the Museum of Nature and Science, that's the Art Museum. Those are our big tier ones.
And the DCPA.
And DCPA, thank you. The Denver Center for the Performing Arts. So the committee voted the first week that we were there to not have the tier one culturals come in and present their projects. There was a number of reasons for that. The main reason is they felt like that created an inequity, that some of those entities might have an advantage in some CGI graphics or just in the presentation that others may not. They also felt that since we had community projects that we knew were coming in as well, the Burns Park came out of the community, the historic Chinatown Alley that was on your list came out of the community, the Galleria actually, the charrette restoration came out of, or reactivation came out of the community, even though it was on the 6-year CFP, that they felt that that would create an inequity where you had some people with a lot of financial backing and resources versus others that did not have that. So they chose to not allow that. That was their choice. We gave it to them, and that's how it went. So what we did do is we reached out to all of the tier ones and said, give us your material and we will disperse your printed material to the committees. The committee had access to written questionnaires that the committee had put together that they wanted additional information, asked about economic impacts, some about whether or not the facilities could be used for emergency use. So we're going to go ahead and give all of that back to you all as well. Some of them have fly-through videos, some of them have CGI graphics, they have teaser reels, some have just a couple pages of plans. There's a lot of information there. Just want to prep you in advance. There's a lot that's there. The questionnaires and the responses we got were significant. But I think it's probably worth you all seeing. I have not watched Councilman Flynn's presentation to you all from last week yet, so I apologize on being delayed in that. The only unanimous Tier 1 project we had was the American Indian Cultural Embassy. Loretto Heights Garage was one vote away from being there as well. Primarily, the things that we heard back were that there was a need to get culturals out of the city center and into the suburbs and outlying areas. They really wanted to see cultural activities outside of just downtown. Both of those are outside of downtown. So I feel like those are. Yes, of course.
Even Kevin said something about the suburbs.
Mhm.
Is he referring to the suburbs or is he referring to the non-downtown area of Denver? I got that confused. We're not supposed to be serving the suburbs, although we do. Hopefully they're paid up. What do you say when you say the suburbs?
I think it's when you look at, what I've heard is when you look at DMNS and the zoo, they're right beside each other. When you talk about the art museum, it's downtown, the arts complex, it's downtown. These are all walking distances.
Right.
So what we heard is if you grew up in Harvey Park, or if you grew up in.
He's talking about
suburbs.
He's talking about Denver
Yeah, that's what I thought.
neighborhoods
The
outside of the
suburbs.
downtown core.
Denver that isn't District 9
Right.
and 10.
Got it. Well, then let's say that. Let's not use the
Yeah.
word suburbs.
Yeah.
I got confused.
Yeah, I mean, we're restricted to spending money within the city and county.
Of course.
So that's,
But
we're
the first
talking
meeting,
city.
there was mention of suburbs. Kevin even mentioned it, or in his report. It's in writing, and he
Yeah.
mentioned it.
Yes, when they're talking suburbs, they're talking outlying areas inside the city and county of Denver that are not the downtown
Got
area.
it. I understand that.
Okay. So those were big parts there. The other thing, and I think it came up earlier in this meeting, was the idea of matching funds. We had one project, the zoo, that had a commitment to match a significant amount of funds. I'm sure you all are probably aware of that by now. I think the match was $120 million. We have other projects that have said that they can or plan to sell naming rights like Betcher. So those are the only two that we have there. The other culturals, whether it was DMNS or the Art Museum, seem to feel that trying to fundraise for projects like roofs and critical maintenance items would be almost an impossible ask. So that's where they did not. The only other place that I would really want to highlight is that the Botanic Gardens effectively submitted 3 projects as one. They have a a ticket booth renovation. They have a new succulent and oranges house. And then they have like a new amphitheater area that all combined into one. We can provide breakout pricing for each area if you wanted to consider funding partials there. I think that the reason it tiered so low, pretty clearly out of the committee, was because of their approach. Had they broken it up into 3 different projects, I think you'd have seen 3 distinctly different tiers, primarily because they felt that the new succulent house could have a match and the new amphitheater could have had a match. And if you look at the ticketing renovation, that probably would have tiered highly.
Well, I err on the side of, yes, scale or, break projects down. I think we're going to be facing that in every category. So to the extent that it's possible, yes, please do break them down.
Sure.
In bite-sized chunks. You've mentioned questionnaires a couple of times.
Mhm.
What questionnaires and who distributed them?
So I distributed them.
Okay.
The committee originally requested to rewrite the scoring criteria, which we could not do because we had 5 committees and all of these needed to come back together to blend into a ranking for you all. So we couldn't have 5 different sets of scoring. So where we settled on was that we would effectively ask additional questions that were very tailored to the to these entities and these submittals. So we asked additional questions about how these projects would factor in to anti-displacement efforts, or how they would help preserve, potentially lost arts or food or culture, how they would work, for these facilities would work in the event of another pandemic or emergency. Did they provide emergencies, facilities back out into the community?
And they were asked of, the questionnaires were.
We're asked of every person that submitted, if we could find an entity that submitted, if it came directly out of the community. We went to supporting agencies such as Arts and Venues, or whoever we could that would be the best person to answer those questions.
So this is a supplement that went to every project. on
Every
all of the
single
committees.
project.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Paul. Sorry. Thanks, Patrick.
Cool.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions for Patrick on the cultural entities? Okay. Schedule. You have a piece of paper in front of you all that has the current schedule as it exists now. Two things, we need to add one more meeting at least, I think. So 2 weeks out. So either the 10th or the 11th is what we were looking at. I don't know if there's a preference among those of you who are still here or online. Also can include that in the email that I'll send out to see if there's a preference that way. You want to check your calendars.
Is it possible to do it to the home? Or was everybody only available on the 10th or 11th?
The 9th is probably difficult for the council president. But if it works for the vast majority of everybody else, then I think we can.
You want me to send her out another? I can send her out another.
The 9th or 10th.
Yeah.
I will include it in the follow-up email and let you all respond.
Yeah, give a couple of options
Yep.
there.
Okay.
And is it safe to say that these 8 to 10s are gonna be like today's 8
They're
to
gonna
10?
be 8 to 11, yeah. Yeah, we'll go ahead and adjust the calendar invites as well. Okay.
God bless all of you who are still on the screen.
Thank you all for staying with us for an extra almost hour. Thanks, Christine. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.